Chapter 765. However, I will make it up at around 14 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. After the plot outside was over, the next chapter would be back in Chinsong. Pengyuan Sect's mountain gate was surrounded by cliffs on 3 sides, and one faced the sea. The terrain was higher in the west and lower in the east. There were more than 10 high hills in the mansion, all of which were the residences of core transformation cultivators. The main hall of the sect was on the northern cliff, so one could overlook the scenery inside the sect at any time and place. Mu Bingxin welcomed Zhang Yan into the main hall and invited him to the seat of honor. Pengyuan Sect's sect master, Chu Jinghua, also came out to greet him. However, his complexion was gloomy, and it could be seen that he was injured to the point where it was difficult to recover. At most, he had 10 years left to live, so he only showed his face for a moment before excusing himself and returning to the mansion to recuperate. After Mu Bingxin and Zhang Yan talked for a while, she heard that his disciples were still at sea, so she immediately ordered the 2 people beside her, "You 2 go and bring spiritual master Zhang's disciple here." The 2 people immediately showed hesitation. Although Zhang Yan came from the outside, he was still spiritual master Yuanying after all, so the devil sect most likely wouldn't provoke him. However, they were only core transformation cultivators. If they went out and bumped into a powerful person, it would be bad. The 2 hesitated, so they didn't immediately go forward to receive the order. Mu Bingxin saw that the 2 people were actually hesitating, and she felt that she had lost face in front of Zhang Yan. She immediately became furious and was about to scold them. Seeing this, Jiang Zheng hurriedly stood up and said, "Spiritual Master Mu, disciple, and 2 senior sisters haven't seen each other for a long time. Can martial nephew accompany the 2 senior brothers?" Mu Bingxin was startled, then her expression softened and she said, "All right, then I'll have to trouble martial nephew Jiang." The 2 cultivators also realized that what they were doing was inappropriate. Fortunately, Jiang Zheng helped them in time. They both let out a sigh of relief and cast him a grateful glance. When they arrived at the door together, one of them cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother Jiang, thank you." Jiang Zheng cupped his fists and said, "As long as the 2 senior brothers don't mind me meddling." The man sighed and said, "How could that be? Today, we 2 brothers owe senior brother Jiang a favor. If anything happens in the future, please help us. Just tell me what you want." Although they had previously known that Jiang Zheng was Zhang Yan's disciple, they had all thought that his status in Zhao Nether Palace was not high. Otherwise, why would he have been sent to Pengyuan Sect? Thus, when they met, they would only greet each other and did not have much of a relationship. However, now that Zhang Yan had personally come to visit him, he realized that he was gravely mistaken. Moreover, it was just now. Thus, he became extremely polite. Jiang Zheng looked at the sky and said, "That big ship is only 2 to 4 hours away from here. We'll go and return quickly. If we can get back before sunset, we should be fine." The man laughed aloud and said, "Other than Elder Mu in the sect, there is no one else. Senior brother Zhang's cultivation is the highest. With you here, what do we have to fear?" Jiang Zheng also smiled and took the lead. The 2 of them also stepped on smoke and clouds and followed closely. There were many demonic cultivators on the sea, but just now, the scene of Yang Shozhen being crushed to death by the Xian Huang hand had been seen by many. When they heard that the newcomer was Zhang Yan, they all retreated far away in fear, not daring to approach this region of the sea. Thus, the 3 of them smoothly reached Dragon Country's big ship without any hiccups. When the Wang sisters saw that it was Jiang Zheng, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. Reuniting with fellow sect members for a long time, they spoke for a while. Only then did they guide the big ship to Pengyuan Sect. At this time, in Pengyuan Sect, a disciple came to report, "Elder Pengyuan, there are 2 core formation cultivators outside. One of them is called Shindong and claims to be Zhang Zhenren's disciple. He wants to see Zhang Zhenren." Mu Bingxin unconsciously looked over. She smiled and said, "When did Zhang Zhenren take in another good disciple?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This person only seeks the Tao in my sect and is not my disciple. However, I see that he is a talent that can be groomed. That's why I keep him by my side. Mu Bingxin thought for a while and said, quickly invite him up. Not long after, Shen Dong was led to the hall by a Pingyuan disciple. He had a respectful expression and bowed to the two of them. Just now, he was not far from Pingyuan's sect. Thus, when he saw that Zhang Yan and Yang Shoujin were fighting, he didn't return to Dragon Country's big ship and directly came here to pay his respects. Mu Bingxin saw that Shen Dong was 9 feet tall and had a beautiful beard. He looked dignified and had an excellent bone structure. In her sect, only Dan Huizhen could compare to him. She couldn't help but think, since he is not Zhang Jinren's disciple, I wonder if he can stay in my Pingyuan sect? I might as well ask him later. After Shen Dong straightened his body, he said, Zhang Jinren, Mu Jinren, when I was investigating outside, I met a Taoist on the sea. He said that he was going to Pingyuan sect to deliver elixirs. However, this person saw that there were demon sect disciples patrolling the place where the elixirs were stored, so he could only choose to avoid them. He originally wanted to come to Pingyuan sect, but he didn't bring a token. Coincidentally, we met, so he asked me to pass a message to see if I can enter the sect and pay my respects. Mu Bingxin suddenly stood up and asked, did that person claim to be a disciple of Scarlet Yang sect? Shen Dong said, yes. Mu Bingxin said happily, that's right. My disciple is in trouble. In order to protect his primordial spirit, he went around looking for elixirs. That person came to deliver the elixirs to my sect. Zhang Yan smiled and said, since Elder Mu has something to do, I will take my leave first. Mu Bingxin was worried about her disciple, so she didn't want to stay any longer. She said apologetically, it's my fault for not being a good host. She turned around and ordered, someone, prepare a good cave for Zhang Jinren. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said goodbye. He followed a disciple to the left side of the mountain. After walking for about 100 steps, he turned into a hidden cliff and walked forward along a 10-feet-long rope path. When he reached the end, he scraped to the left and arrived at a courtyard with flower petals fluttering in the wind. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a 3-story pavilion. Under the eaves, there were jade pearls and golden bells that shook and collided with the wind, making a pleasant sound. He entered the pavilion and dismissed the servants. Then he went up to the 3rd floor of the pavilion and sat down on the couch. He closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. About an hour later, there was a loud voice outside the door, Zhang Jinren, Scarlet Yang sect disciple Shen Shuasong wants to see you. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, please come in. Not long after, a middle-aged Taoist with black hair and beard came in. When he saw Zhang Yan, he quickly stepped forward and cupped his hands, greetings, Jinren Zhang. Zhang Yan looked at him and smiled, Scarlet Yang is where the Beichin sect is located. Are you a disciple of the Beichin sect? Shen Shuasong said respectfully, Jinren Zhang is wise. I didn't mean to hide it. I was just afraid that the devil sect would pick a fight, so I didn't say it in the letter. Zhang Yan nodded and asked, how are Elder Yan and Jinren Lu? Shen Shuasong said, Elder Yan and Madame Lu are well. They often talk about you, saying that without your care, the Beichin sect would not have survived the devil tribulation. Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, from your words, it seems that the sect is not doing well. It seems like the sect is not doing well. Shen Shuasong sighed and said, the 6 great demon sects can't touch the 10 great mysterious sects, but they often come to disturb our small sections. In the past, when Huxian was in power, he took good care of my sect and did not succeed. He even had the strength to help the other sects that were on good terms with him many times. After the competition in your sect 2 years ago, Jinren Huo was replaced by Jinren Du. He was much colder to us small sects and called back all the disciples that you sent to guard the sect. This couldn't be hidden from the devil sect, so the past 2 years have been quite difficult. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. The cultivators of the devil sect were cunning, especially the cultivators of the Jiling sect. They were good at disturbing people's hearts and shaking their souls. Disciples with low cultivation would often be manipulated by them if they weren't careful. Many small sects were destroyed without knowing why. Not to mention that it was extremely difficult to guard against. As time went on, people would inevitably panic. If the sect didn't have a strong person to hold the fort, it would indeed not be easy to resist. Huaxian valued relationships and used gentle methods to the surrounding sections. He must have heard that he was on good terms with Beichen, which was why he specially took care of him. And Dudo was from the Duda family and had always respected the principle of eliminating the strong. The Beichen sect naturally wouldn't be as good as before. Qinsang school had already supported many small sects for more than 100 years. If they gave up now, their previous efforts would be in vain. If these sects were destroyed, there would be no barrier around Qinsang school. Once those cultivators of the Xianmen sect died, they would definitely be used to refine techniques. It was equivalent to increasing the strength of the devil sect, so he didn't agree with this. After thinking for a moment, he said slowly, "Since you're here, why don't you tell Elder Yen for me? Tell him not to be anxious. At least a month, at most half a year. The situation will definitely change." Shen Shuasong was overjoyed. He knew this spiritual master Zhang's ability. As long as he said it, he would most likely be able to do it. After repeatedly thanking him, he left. For the next 3 days, Zhang Yan stayed in Pingyuan Gate. On one hand, he ordered his disciples to clean up the devil sect cultivators everywhere. On the other hand, he took time to guide Jiang Zheng in his cultivation. On the 4th day, he went to say goodbye to Mu Bingxin. However, Mu Bingxin said, "Spiritual Master Zhang, don't leave in a hurry. I have something to discuss with you." She pulled over a charming female disciple beside her and said, "This is my disciple Kai Ai. She also has core formation cultivation. What do you think, Spiritual Master Zhang, about her and nephew Shen?" Kai Ai's pretty face blushed and she lowered her head. She didn't have any resistance. Small sects mostly used marriage to collude with big sections. Even if she didn't become Shendong's cultivation companion, she would be forced to marry someone else sooner or later. Fortunately, she had secretly looked at Shendong these few days and was very satisfied with his appearance and cultivation. Zhang Yan took a look and said with a smile, "Since Shendong isn't my disciple, he should make the decision himself." Seeing that Zhang Yan didn't object, Mu Bingxin was instantly happy and thought that this matter would most likely succeed. In the past few days, she had ordered people to inquire about Shendong. Although Shendong learned superior cultivation methods, he didn't have a master. It seemed that he was quite appreciated by Zhang Yan. If she could rope him in and make him a good son-in-law like Jiang Zheng, it would definitely be of great benefit to the sect. She said, "Then I'll go and talk to Martial Nephew Shen now." Zhang Yan said with a smile, "Spiritual Master Mu, please help yourself." After saying goodbye, he went out of Pingyuan Gate and met up with a group of disciples. Then, he boarded the Dragon Country's big ship and told them to set sail. Zhao Yang looked around and said, "Master, Shendong hasn't boarded the ship yet." Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and said, "Don't worry about him. He'll catch up in a moment." The Dragon Country's big ship shook, stirred up the waves, and sailed toward the continent. In less than a moment, they saw Shendong flying from behind in a cloud of smoke. After landing, he saw Zhang Yan standing at the bow of the ship. He took a few steps forward and bowed, wanting to explain something. However, Zhang Yan waved his hand at him and said indifferently, "In the future, don't talk about being my disciple. Do you understand?" Shendong's back was covered in cold sweat. He knew that his little trick that day had been seen through again. He lowered his head and said, "Yes." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "You're on your own." After saying this, he walked into the cabin. Chapter 766. After a few days, the Dragon Country's ship crossed the sea and came ashore. However, it did not soar into the clouds. Instead, it floated hundreds of feet in the air and headed in the direction of Qinsang School. If they traveled like this, they would be seen from afar. They thought that people from the Devil's Doctrine would come looking for them. The Wang sisters, Zhao Yang, Shendong, and the others originally wanted to test their methods, but the smoothness of the journey greatly exceeded their expectations. Along the way, wherever the dragon country's ship passed, the cultivators from the devil's doctrine all retreated. No one dared to provoke them. However, the Xianmen cultivators along the way noticed that something was wrong and ordered their disciples to go out and find out what was going on. When they heard that Zhang Yan had returned from another continent, they were all surprised and sent their disciples to greet him. For hundreds of years, although the Xianmen had fought many times, the sword duel between the 18 sects was the most brutal. Not to mention that most of the casualties were Yuanying cultivators, even the young talents of the 10 sects of Xianmen were killed. After this battle, both sides were very careful and did not have any major confrontations. As the best in sword duels, Zhang Yan was often used by the teachers of the 10 sects of Xianmen to motivate the younger disciples. Especially since he was not born in a noble family and did not have a cave master as his teacher, he relied on himself to get to where he was. Other than being amazed, people couldn't help but feel respect for him. The disciples of Qinsang school who went out to train were mostly master and disciple, and Zhang Yan was quite popular among them. Every time they encountered a powerful enemy and were forced to retreat, they would talk about how great it would be if Jinren Zhang was here. After so many years, his reputation was so high that no one in Xianmen other than the cave master could compare to him. Therefore, before Chidragon's ship even arrived at the Black Tsang sect, thousands of cultivators and disciples had already gathered here after hearing the news. They surrounded the ship and headed north in a mighty manner. As a result, no cultivators from the Devil sect dared to provoke them. Zhao Yang was speechless. In the past, he had only heard Zhang Boyan talk about Zhang Yan's illustrious reputation in the Donghua continent. But after all, he had only heard about it and did not have a direct impression of it. This time, he had some understanding. He sighed and said, "Jinren Zhang is so impressive." Shendong's eyes were filled with a strange light. His fingers gripped the side of the ship tightly as he stared down below. Inside the mountain gate of the Bu Pavilion, the sect master Yuqing was frowning in silence. For the past 10 days, the situation had been very strange. The number of Devil sect cultivators outside the mountain decreased day by day, and there was no movement these past few days. She suspected that the Devil sect was up to something again, so she did not relax. Instead, he became even more vigilant. Originally, when the Qinsang school disciples were stationed there, the various sects seemed to be united as one. As long as one sect was attacked, the neighboring sects would definitely come to its rescue. In the past 100 years, except for one sect that was destroyed due to its weak foundation, the rest were all stable. However, ever since the Yutsang sect withdrew the disciples stationed there a few years ago, there was no one to liaise with. Every sect had been divided into countless small pieces and had returned to the situation where they were doing their own thing in the past. It was somewhat difficult to deal with the Devil's doctrine. She repeatedly wrote several letters to Qinsang school, pleading for more disciples to be sent to guard the school, but it was always like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no reply. She had already made up her mind. If Qinsang school was really unreliable, then she could only rely on Nanhua sect again. If a small sect did not have the protection of a big sect, it would definitely not be able to survive this demonic tribulation. At this moment, she suddenly heard a noise outside and frowned unconsciously. She was about to ask when her son Yan Xiaoyang ran in excitedly with a flying letter in his hand. He shook it happily and said, "Mother, Jinren Zhang is back from the foreign continent." Yuqing did not react for a moment and said blankly, "Jinren Zhang, which Jinren Zhang?" Then she suddenly came to a realization. Her eyes lit up and she got up and asked anxiously, "Could it be Zhang Yan Jinren Zhang?" Yan Xiaoyang clapped his fist and said excitedly, "It is Zhang Yan Jinren Zhang. I heard that after the Xian Mo sword competition, Jinren Zhang went to travel overseas. This time when he came back, his supernatural power and cultivation must be better than before. I'm afraid it will not be Du De alone who has the final say." However, Yuqing quickly calmed down and said, "Is that so?" Yan Xiaoyang handed over the letter and said, "If mother doesn't believe me, you can read it yourself." Yuqing took the letter and read it carefully. After fighting with the Devil sect for so many years, she learned not to trust anything easily. She was afraid that it was a trick, so she had to be careful. But after reading it, she found that the handwriting and the seal were not fake. Only then did she believe it and thought, when Jinren supported our Blue Feather Pavilion, it was thanks to Jinren Zhang's help. He also protected our small sect. Now that he is back, it is not certain whether he can turn the situation around. After thinking for a long time, she raised her head and asked, "Where is Jinren Zhang?" Yan Xiaoyang said, "The letter was sent from Beichin yesterday. Today, Jinren Zhang is probably thousands of miles away." Yuqing immediately made a decision and said, "My son, call Siya and follow me to pay a visit to Jinren Zhang." Yan Xiaoyang was stunned and said, "If we rush over now, I'm afraid Jinren Zhang has returned to the Great Pool of Dragon Lake. He may not have time to see us." Yuqing smiled and said, "Can't this show our sincerity? Go quickly." Yan Xiaoyang hurriedly ran down to prepare. After preparing the gifts, the three of them used their escape techniques and left the sect, heading in the direction of the clear nether heavenly lake. Great Pool of Dragon Lake, Molten Smoke Island, Roaring Fire Palace. Xiaoling raised his wine cup and toasted Du De in front of him. He said with a smile, "Senior brother Du, I heard that junior brother Zhang has returned. Should we arrange for disciples to go out and welcome him?" Du De said indifferently, "Junior brother Zhang is one of my top 10 disciples. He has left the sect for 100 years. His return is certainly worthy of celebration, but it is also normal. There is no need to mobilize so many people." He said to a disciple beside him, "Pass down my order. The disciples of the sect are not allowed to go out without my order. Those who violate it will be severely punished." Xiaoling's finger lightly knocked on the wine cup, and he said meaningfully, "Junior brother Zhang's reputation is extremely great now. If you don't welcome him, it's still reasonable. But if you restrain your disciple, I'm afraid that senior brother won't tolerate others." Du De said coldly, "When have I, Du De, ever cared about the words of others?" Xiaoling chuckled and raised his head to drink the wine in his cup. He then took his leave and went outside. A disciple helped him to the carriage. He sat down on the soft couch. The disciple waved his hand and the flying carriage rose into the air. After leaving Firehall Island, the disciple turned back and said, "Master is brilliant. In this way, no one will say that Master didn't care about our friendship. Even if Sage Zhang wants to find trouble, he won't come to Master." Another disciple said, "How can senior uncle Du compare to Master? Didn't he still fall into Master's trap today? In my opinion, the first seat of the top 10 disciples should be given to Master." The previous disciple hurriedly agreed. Xiao Gui laughed and shook his head. "Do you think that senior brother Du really can't see Master's plan? He understands it very well." Pausing, he said playfully, "It is not so easy to be the first seat of the top 10 disciples." Clear nether heavenly lake. Lu Yanyi sat on the jade lotus platform, her eyes closed as she cultivated in the cave. She wore a plain wide-sleeved Taoist robe and her long hair was tied with silver rings. Her face was beautiful and her skin was like ice jade. Above her head were two clouds that moved like flowing water, clear and quiet. As they rotated slowly, there seemed to be the sound of the tide rising and falling, causing the cave walls to echo from time to time. Suddenly there were footsteps outside the door. Disciple Lin Sishue ran into the cave with a face full of joy. She did not speak softly like before. Instead, she shouted outside the door, "Master, Master, there is a letter from outside the mountain gate saying that Grandmaster is coming back." Lu Yanyi heard this and suddenly opened her eyes. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, revealing a look of surprise and joy. He waved his sleeves, and the cave door opened. "Is it true?" Lin Sishu entered the cave and bowed. She said with grievance, "When did disciple dare to lie to Master?" Lu Yanyi raised her hand and lightly knocked her head. She said, "Don't be funny. Did Master Luo report?" Lin Sishua's beautiful eyes widened. She said, "Master, did you forget that Master Luo and Grandmaster have a telepathic connection? I think he already knew." Lu Yanyi shook her head and said, even so, I should have informed him. Lin Sixue thought for a while and nodded heavily. She said, it is disciples' negligence. I will arrange it in a while. She wiped the fragrance bag and handed over a letter. The letter is here. Lu Yanyi took it and read it. Then, she got down from the lotus seat and paced a few steps. She said, Master will return to the mountain gate in half a day. After you go down, call all the juniors in the sect to welcome him with me. Lin Sixue bowed and said happily, yes, Master. Zhang Yan had left the sect for more than 100 years. Now, not counting the second-generation disciples, there were more than 10 third-generation disciples in the sect. Lin Sixue, Zhua Hanzhang and the others had also taken in disciples. Including Luo Xiao, Shang Cheng and the other demon cultivators, there were more than 30 people. After receiving Lu Yanyi's order, they all left the mountain gate together and went to the top of Zhaoyu Mountain. When Lu Yanyi reached the top of Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake, she looked up and saw the sky full of stars and the moon hanging in the west. It was still midnight. At this moment, they suddenly saw escaping smoke flying over from the mountain gate of Qinsong. Everyone looked over in surprise. When the escaping smoke got closer, they realized it was a core formation cultivator wearing the robe of a true disciple. This person held up the jade talisman in his hand and said, Master Du has ordered that all disciples of Qinsong must guard the mountain gate and not go out. Those who violate the order will be punished severely. He was afraid that the disciples of Zhaoyu sect would ignore him, so he shook his hand and sent a letter over. He said, the talisman of Roaring Fire Palace is here. Please take a look, Master Lu. Lu Yanyi raised her slender hand and took it. After reading it, her expression remained unchanged. She tore the letter and said lightly, my master has returned. As the eldest disciple of Zhaoyu sect, how can I not welcome him? If Jinren Du wants to punish me, I, Lu Yanyi, will be waiting for him at any time. The disciples saw her actions and did not dare to say anything. Lu Yanyi was on good terms with Qi Yuntian and Ning Chongxian. She and Qin Nan were like sisters. She was even taught by sect master Qin. In addition, she was the eldest disciple of Zhang Yan. She had killed many cultivators of the devil's doctrine outside. Even if the elders of Jingqing courtyard were here, they would only turn a blind eye to it. How could he dare to care? Thus, he bowed and left in a hurry. Although Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake was under Qinsong, because the cave abode was outside the mountain gate, there were fewer restrictions in the sect. Most of the younger generation were not afraid, but there were also people who were worried. Among the third-generation disciples, there was a disciple named Jin Honglian, who was Han Zuoqing's disciple. He said, what are you afraid of? Master is going back. If there is anything, he will help us. When everyone heard this, they felt that it was reasonable. They were excited and looked to the east with anticipation. The night passed quickly. The black color in the sky faded and a round sun rose slowly, sprinkling thousands of golden rays. At this moment, everyone's vision blurred. They saw a large boat that was hundreds of feet long leaping out of the sun, bringing with it vast clouds and heading straight to this place. Chapter 767. Is that the clear nether heavenly lake? Zhao Yang looked over and saw a mountain standing on the vast plains. It was like a lonely pillar that rose from the ground and went straight into the clouds, as if it wanted to connect the earth to the sky. The surrounding clouds and mist gathered, and the smoke enveloped the area. He felt relaxed and happy as he looked at it. At this time, he saw a group of cultivators on the peak and called out, Junior Apprentice Brother Shen, come and take a look. Zhang Jinren's sect has come out to welcome you. Shen Dong took a few steps forward and took a few glances. He pointed to the front and said, who is that fellow Taoist in front? Is he from the same sect as Zhang Jinren? Zhao Yang looked over and saw that the person he was pointing at was an elegant and beautiful woman. She wore a plain white Taoist robe and had her hair tied up with a silver ring. Her eyes were clear like water, and her beauty was something he had never seen in his life. He couldn't help but take a few more glances. He lowered his head and pondered for a while. He said, Master said that Zhang Zhenren's eldest disciple, Lu Yenny, is talented and intelligent. Since she is standing at the front, she must be senior apprentice sister Lu. Shandong couldn't help but be shocked, and he said with uncertainty, Senior sister Lu, could it be that you're already a nascent soul cultivator? Zhao Yang was a disciple of Zhang Boyan. He had learned the method of distinguishing qi. He took a few more glances and confirmed, elder martial sister Lu's body is surrounded by strong qi. Although my cultivation is not good and it is difficult for me to see the qi cloud, I am sure she is a Yuanying stage cultivator. Shandong took a deep breath and slowly moved his gaze away to look at someone else. However, with this glance, his pupils constricted slightly. Not far behind Lu Yenny was a handsome young man with a slight smile on his face. On his shoulder was a white-haired old ape, and above his head was a cloud. It was actually another nascent soul Taoist master. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, who is this? Zhao Yang saw the white-haired old ape and immediately guessed his identity. He smiled and said, I think it is Zhang Zhenren's sixth disciple, Wei Zihong, senior apprentice brother Wei. This is the sect master of Yaoyin clan during the sword battle of the 18 sections. At this point, he suddenly turned his head. Speaking of which, this senior brother's situation is somewhat similar to junior brother Shen's. Shandong snorted and thought to himself, he's just a few years ahead of me. If I had perfected Zhang's guidance, I wouldn't lose to him. Very soon, the Qi Dragon ship slowly reached the cliff of Zhaoyu Mountain. Lu Yenny was at the front, and behind her were Wei Zihong and Han Zuocheng. She led a group of people to welcome them, and when they reached the edge of the cliff, she curtsied and said, Welcome back to the mansion, Master. The 3 generations behind him knelt down and said in unison, Greetings, Grandmaster. Zhang Yan came to the bow of the boat and smiled. He raised his hand and said warmly, No need to stand on ceremony. Please rise. Everyone bowed once more before standing up. Zhang Yan's gaze swept over them one by one. He saw that all of his disciples had made great progress in their cultivation. Lu Yenny and Wei Zihong didn't need to be mentioned. Their aptitudes were the best among his disciples, so it wasn't strange for them to reach the nascent soul stage. As for Han Zuocheng, Ming Qi also had core formation cultivation, but he was only at the first level, which was barely satisfactory. On the other hand, Zhua Hanzhang, Lin Xixue, and the other 3 generations also had core formation cultivation. Although there were a few talented disciples under them, their cultivation wasn't high and they still needed to be polished. He shifted his gaze to the back and saw a beautiful woman with an enchanting figure smiling at him. There was a cloud above her head that looked like black smoke. He couldn't help but laugh and said, Fellow Taoist Luo has achieved Yuanying, I have to congratulate you. Luo Xiao pursed her lips and smiled. I'm just basking in the light of old master's grotto heaven. Zhang Yan looked at everyone and found that 2 people were missing. He asked, Where are Wang Ziyuan and Yuan Yanhui? Lu Yenny said, Master, a few days ago, Linqing Monastery sent a letter asking for help. The 2 Taoists took the initiative to go and protect them. They are not in the mansion now. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. Just as he was about to get off the boat, he stopped in his tracks and turned his head to look in the direction of the Great Lake of Dragon Lake. He saw 2 rays of light flying over from that direction. The first one was a piercingly cold sword rainbow that cut across the sky. Following closely behind it was a blue cloud that filled the sky. As it flew, there was a whistling sound. Both of them had an astonishing momentum. Not long after, they arrived above the boat, but they did not descend. Only a voice was heard, Junior Brother Zhang, please come up and talk. Zhang Yan pondered for a while and waved his sleeve. He said to his disciples, You guys go back to the cave and wait for me. After saying that, his body shook and turned into a ray of light and flew up into the sky. When the 2 rays of light saw him coming up, they flew up and broke through the high clouds. After reaching Jiutian, they stopped just now, turned around and showed themselves. The one on the left was dressed in white. He looked cold and heroic. The one on the right was a Taoist in green. Zhang Yan smiled and bowed. Senior Ning, Senior Luo, greetings. Luo Qingyu looked at Zhang Yan for a while and said, when Jinren Shin came back, he said that you would be able to return to the sect in 1 or 200 years. I didn't expect you to come back before 100 years have passed. Junior Ning, what do you think? Ning Chongshuan's eyes lit up and disappeared after a while. He nodded and said, you really have the cultivation of the 3rd level of Yuanying. Luo Qingyu shook his head and sighed, Junior Martial Brother's talent, I am convinced. He then waved his sleeve and said, let's not talk about this today. The two of us are here to discuss something else with Junior Martial Brother. Zhang Yan could also guess a little, so he said, you two are Senior Martial Brothers, please speak. Luo Qingyu said slowly, since you have the cultivation of the 3rd level, you should be the leader of the top 10. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. He thought for a while and asked, is it Senior Brother's idea? Luo Qingyu looked at Ning Chongxian and said, it is Senior Brother's idea, as well as mine and the other Junior Brother's idea. Zhang Yan nodded his head slightly. He noticed that both of them mentioned Jinren Shin just now. If he was not mistaken, there must be a few enlightened masters behind this. Otherwise, Ning and Luo would not have come together. It was just that it was inconvenient to say it out loud. He thought for a while and said, what about the current situation? Luo Qingyu saw that he did not reject immediately and his expression relaxed a little. He said, after Senior Brother Hua passes away, Junior Brother Chen Feng will take over. As for Senior Brother Zhong, Junior Sister Feng will take over from Immortal Qin's disciple, Junior Sister Feng. The two of them have just entered the 10 greats and have yet to establish their prestige. Their words do not carry much weight and their cultivation is temporarily not comparable to ours. I, Junior Brother Ning, Junior Brother Zhuang and Junior Sister Qin are all on your side. He, Zhuang Bufan, and the others would at most step down in a few decades. By then, the person who would take over the position would be their junior brother. However, they were in the midst of the devil's calamity. If the leader was still in the hands of the aristocratic families, there would be problems. Zhang Yan was different. Although he was not the direct descendant of the master and disciple, he would not be biased towards the aristocratic families. If there were no accidents, he could still sit on the position for more than 100 years. With his cultivation of the 3rd level of Yuanying, if he could become the leader of the top 10, his position would be unshakable. When he retired, the others who took over the position would be able to hold their own. At this moment, Ning Chongxian looked over and said, Junior Brother Zhang, your cultivation is so profound that no one in the top 10 can compare to you. The leader's position is yours to take. On this day, 3 white-haired old Taoists landed in front of Molten Smoke Island's fiery roaring palace. These 3 were of high seniority in the 4 major clans, and all of them had the title of elder on duty in Daylight Hall. The 3 were led to the main hall of the palace by the attendant. Duda was already waiting inside. After inviting the 3 to sit down, the leading elder said slowly, Jinren Du, why did you invite us here? Duda said calmly, I want to resign from the position of the top 10 leaders. I've specially informed the elders. The leading elder was shocked and said, what? Resign from the position of the top 10 leaders? The other 2 elders were also in disbelief. They exchanged glances and one of them frowned and said, is this a private opinion of Jinren Du, or is it the intention of the Du family? Duda did not answer but said indifferently, I've been sitting on this position for more than 300 years. I have no interest in the remaining decades. It's better to give it up. The leading elder waved his hand and said without thinking, absolutely not. He seemed to be aware that his tone was too heavy. He coughed and said, Jinren Du, why do you have such thoughts? When Jinren Huo was still around, he gave way to the master and his disciples step by step. As a result, the number of external objects and spiritual places and abodes was greatly reduced compared to before. Jinren Qin did not say anything on the surface, but we can all see that he is extremely disappointed in him. Now we need to rely on you to pull ourselves together. After a few decades, the situation will change greatly. How can you just say that you want to resign at such a critical time? Duda was unmoved and said, "Yesterday when junior brother Zhang returned, I ordered the sect not to go out to welcome him. I believe the three elders have heard about the result." The three of them were silent. On the day Zhang Yan returned, Luo Qingyu and Ning Chongxian ignored Duda's order and went out to welcome him. But half a day later, Qin Nan and Zhuang Bufan also went to visit Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. How could they not see the deep meaning in every move? But how could they be willing to give up the top 10 positions? After a while, the leading elder said slowly, "There are 5 people on their side, and there are also 5 people on Jinrendu's side. If they fight, the outcome is still uncertain." When he said this, he was actually not confident enough. After all, it was a game of chess played behind the scenes by several Jinren Dongtian. Since Shenbaishuang became a cave abode, Qin Yu rarely spoke. It was hard to say whether she would stand on their side this time. At this time, a light suddenly rose on the jade platform in the palace. There seemed to be a person standing in it, and a sonorous voice came, "Duda, I allow you to resign." Everyone present looked serious. They all stood up and bowed respectfully, "Greetings, Jinrendu." Jinrendu sneered and said to the three of them, "You have lived in vain, but you are not as clear as Duda. Now that Zhang Yan has returned to the mountain gate, it is the master and his disciples who want to help him take the position. This is Meng Zhida and the others who are using their power to oppress him, so we can only give in first." An elder was not convinced and said boldly, "Why don't you let Jinrendu and Jinren Zhang compete? We are not willing to give in for no reason." Jinrendu suddenly fell silent and then said, "Zhang Yan is a genius. Now he is a cultivator in the 3rd level of Yuanying. Duda is not his opponent." "What?" The 3 elders were all shocked. One of them seemed to think of something and said involuntarily, This Zhang Yan has cultivated for less than 300 years, right?" The 3 of them were a little dizzy. His elixir was at the 1st level, and he became a cultivator in the 3rd level of Yuanying in less than 300 years. Throughout the ages, there seemed to be very few people like him. At this time, Duda's eyes flashed, and he suddenly said, "Senior brother Luo didn't come to compete with me for the top 10 chiefs. Now it seems that he already had a plan." Jinrendu said in a low voice, "Shenbaishuang met Zhang Yan in Dongsheng and made this arrangement after he came back. We did not expect this. This time, the master and his disciples won." The 3 elders looked at each other. A few years ago, after Huxian lost his position, Luo Qingyu and Duda both had the opportunity to take the chief's position. However, their cultivations were similar. If they fought, it was hard to say who would win. Therefore, the family paid a great price to make them withdraw voluntarily. But it seemed that they did it on purpose. Jinrendu said, "Duda has been in charge of the chief's position for years, and your family has gained a lot of benefits. Now, the Du family has offended people for you. Don't bother us again." After saying this, a gust of wind suddenly rose in the hall. The 3 elders felt their minds shake and drifted out in a daze. When they woke up again, they found that they were already outside the smelting island. The elder in charge sighed and said, "It's a pity that the chief's position is going to fall into the hands of the master and his disciples again in less than 200 years. Chapter 768. I'm not feeling dizzy, but I'm sore all over. I'm so sad." Ever since Zhang Yan discussed with Ning Chongxian and Luo Qingyu, he went back to his residence and did not come out. There was no need for him to do anything. His master and his disciples would put pressure on the aristocratic families. If the other party insisted on not giving in, then he would have to come out and challenge Duda. For the next few days, he only guided his disciples in their cultivation. Occasionally, he would go to the depths of the clear Serenity Lake. The divine beast egg was still not moving and was still absorbing spiritual energy. It would be difficult to conceive in a short period of time, so he did not pay much attention to it. On the 5th day, a letter suddenly arrived. After reading it, he smiled faintly and put down the letter. His body swayed slightly and his Dharma body appeared. He left his physical body behind and flew towards the great pool of Dragon Lake like a ray of clear rainbow light. Although using the Dharmakaya to escape was slightly slower than using the sword, it looked like it was overflowing with Taoist chi and was surrounded by clouds. It was less sharp. Not long after, he arrived at the Danding courtyard and saw Zhou Chengju standing outside the cabin on the mirror-like surface of the lake. He had already started the boat to welcome the guest. Thus, he turned into a beam of light and flew down. When he landed, he cupped his fists and said, "It's been more than 100 years since we last met." Zhou Chengju laughed and said, "I am just an old Taoist priest who burns the furnace. I have been living in seclusion for several hundred years, how can I not be good?" At this time, he looked at Zhang Yan a few times and suddenly exclaimed in surprise. He circled around Zhang Yan a few times, his eyes filled with doubt and surprise. In the end, he asked with uncertainty, "Junior brother, did you succeed?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Fortunately, senior apprentice brother gave me a secret technique. I've already achieved a first-grade Yuanjin Dharmakaya." Zhou Chengju was astonished and said, "This is strange. Although I have never seen the Yuanjin Dharmakaya, there were 2 or 3 people in Yuxiao who achieved this in the past 10,000 years. However, the external signs recorded in the books are very different from your Dharmakaya." He stroked his beard and thought for a while before asking a few more questions. He still could not get the gist of it. In the end, he could only attribute it to the first-grade pill. After exchanging a few words outside, the two entered the cabin and sat down to discuss in detail. Zhang Yan gave a rough account of his experience in Donghua continent. Zhou Chengju listened and nodded. Finally, he patted the table and said excitedly, "When Jinren returned from Dongsheng, he made arrangements. However, in my opinion, the aristocratic family's setback this time was not due to the efforts of others, but due to you, junior brother." He sighed in his heart. His junior brother had achieved the nascent soul in 100 years, and then achieved the Yuanying Dharmakaya in another 100 years. Now, his lifespan was less than 300 years. Perhaps in his lifetime, he would really be able to see the day the Zhou clan was destroyed. Thinking of this, he stood up excitedly and walked 2 steps before he stood still and slowly turned around. Looking at Zhang Yan, he said, "Yesterday, Duda pushed for the position of the head of the 10 great disciples. Junior brother, it is time for you to ride the wind and soar into the sky." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. After achieving the 3rd level of Yuanying, he began to think about how to form the grotto heaven. It was just that he didn't know how to go about it, so he took this step. However, Zhou Chengju couldn't help him and could only rely on the sect. The sect had always spent a lot of effort to support the people who became the head of the 10 great disciples, and the other 9 people couldn't compare to them. If he could achieve something in this position, or if he could make great contributions to the sect, it would be no small matter. Now that the demon tribulation had started, the opportunity was right in front of him. As long as he could grab hold of it, he would be able to soar into the sky. At this moment, the voice of the medicine boy came from outside the door, "Master, people from the Xianshui Palace are here. They want to invite Jinren Zhang over for a chat." Zhou Chengju hurriedly said, "It must be about the head of the 10 great disciples. Junior brother, hurry up and go." Zhang Yan pondered for a while, then took out an item and placed it on the table. "I got this from the Dongxing continent. Please accept it, senior." After saying this, he turned into a beam of light and flew out of the boat, heading towards the clouds. Zhou Chengju picked it up and took a look. It was a warm and beautiful jade shaped like a tortoise shell, but there were deep patterns on the back, which looked mysterious. As a pill grandmaster, he was familiar with the strange things of the 9 continents, so he could naturally guess what it was. He couldn't help but sigh, "Junior brother, thank you." In just a short while, Zhang Yan arrived at the Xianshui Palace, and a boy came out to lead him inside. Qi Yuntian was wearing a Fubo Xianqing Daoist robe, his sleeves were fluttering, and he was standing on a ferocious single-horned dragon carp. Beneath his feet was a surging river, and behind him stood 2 servants. Seeing him arrive, he smiled, "Junior brother Zhang, we are in the midst of the demonic calamity, and the position of the 10 great disciples should be taken by the most capable ones. You are the most suitable one." He raised his hand, and the servant behind him got off the carp's back and floated over on a lotus flower. She carried a jade plate with both hands, and on it was a golden book, jade stamp, and a black robe. This was a token, and it was also a powerful treasure that only the 10 great disciples could use. Zhang Yan took a glance at it, and with a wave of his sleeves, he kept it. Qi Yuntian said, "For the matter of handing over the seal, we should have gathered the other 9 disciples, read the golden book, and performed the ceremony of respect." However, junior brother Hua did not have to do this previously. This time, the aristocratic family has suffered a setback, and it is not good to go overboard, so I can only inconvenience you. However, Zhang Yan did not mind, and smiled, "It is just a formality." Qi Yuntian smiled, "The formality can be abolished, but the majesty cannot be removed. If the 10 great disciples go out, they must ride on the double dragon chariot. You must remember this." Zhang Yan smiled, and nodded to show that he understood. In reality, the double dragon chariot was only used for meetings, or to show off the identity of the Qinsang school when going out. If one person was going out, of course, it was more convenient to use the art of escape. At this moment, Qi Yuntian's expression became solemn, and he said in a deep voice, "Junior brother, after you become the first disciple, you can do it without any worries. Now is not like the past, for the sake of the devil's trial, you can put aside common sense, and do what you should do. As for the sect, as long as I am here, I can guarantee your safety." Zhang Yan could see that Qi Yuntian wanted him to be free to do whatever he wanted. He would look after the sect, and no one would come and drag him down. If one were to talk about the pressure in the sect, it was very likely that the Taoist master of the heavenly abode was the one who was willing to stand up for them. He was indeed a man of responsibility. This promise was worth 1,000 words. He immediately bowed and said, "Thank you, Taoist master." Qi Yuntian accepted it calmly, and nodded, "Junior brother, since you have already taken the position of first disciple, you should go and pay your respects to the sect master. I won't keep you any longer." Zhang Yan bowed and said goodbye to the Xianshui palace. When he was outside, he took out the talisman given by the sect master and slapped it on the talisman. A spiritual light flashed, and his body flew straight to the floating heavenly palace in the sky. Not long after, he landed in the side hall. After tidying up his attire, he went to the steps of the hall, and bowed, "Disciple, please pass the message that disciple Zhang Yan is here to pay his respects." Hundreds of years had passed, and the disciple who used to guard the hall had already gone to the 9 courtyards to be a deacon. This disciple was new here, so he did not recognize Zhang Yan. Hearing him introduce himself, he did not dare to be slow, and quickly said, "So it's the 10 peak masters. Please wait for a moment, I will go in and pass the message." Not long after he went in, he came out. He said, "Perfected Zhang, the sect master is asking you to go in." Zhang Yan walked into the inner hall and saw sect master Qin smiling at him on the jade platform. He took a few steps forward and bowed, "Disciple Zhang Yan greets sect master." Sect master Qin said with a friendly expression, "Zhang Yan, what you did in East Victory. I have long heard from junior brother Shen that you handled it very appropriately." Zhang Yan bowed and said, "I don't dare to accept your praise, sect master." Sect master Qin smiled and said, "You deserve it. Do you know that you have made things difficult for me? I am in charge of the sect, and I am fair in rewards and punishments. This time, you have made a great contribution to the sect, but I don't know what to give you. After thinking about it for a long time, considering that you are good at swordsmanship, it would be a pity to bury your talent. In the past, the sect master of Shaoqing Mountain owed me a favor. When I was young, I wrote a letter. You can take it to the Shaoqing sect to seek the true teachings, but you don't have to go through the gate." Zhang Yan thought about it. Every time the sect master moved, there must be a deeper meaning behind it. Asking him to learn the sword was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. However, he had cultivated his swordsmanship to this point. If he did not learn the proper teachings and only relied on his own comprehension, it would be extremely difficult to improve. If he could go to the Shaoqing sect to cultivate, it would be in line with his wishes. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Sect Master, for your generous gift." Sect Master Qin nodded and said, "I used a Dharma artifact in the upper extreme hall to deduce that one of the 4 demonic acupoints will definitely appear in the world within a few decades. Now that you are the leader of the top 10 disciples, there are some things that you should know." With a shake of his hand, he threw a jade slip down. "Take it and read it. Come and see me tomorrow." Zhang Yan did not know what it was. He reached out to take it and bowed. Then, he left the side hall and pinched a Dharma talisman. He came down from the floating heavenly palace and turned into a ray of light to return to the cave abode. Then, he activated the restriction array and closed the door of the abode. He took out the jade slip and started reading. After reading it, he was shocked. It actually described the origin of the Donghua continent's spirit acupoint. Since the formation of this world, it was divided into the 9 provinces. The qi dynamic rose and fell, developing the changes of the 5 elements and the division of yin and yang. The pure qi was yang, and the turbid qi was yin. The pure qi floated in the sky. If it was enlightened by great magic at the intersection of the spiritual opportunity, it could become a spirit acupoint. The Donghua continent faced the northern underworld in the north, the southern cliff in the south, the middle pillar in the west, and the sea in the east. It was the one and only pool of spiritual essence in the 9 provinces. Yuxiao, Shaoqing, and Qinsang all occupied the upper reaches, overlooking the continent and intercepting the continent's spiritual opportunity for their own use. This was the foundation of the sect. Only now did Zhang Yan know that the main reason why the former sect master Qin Qinggang led the 12 grotto heavens to the north back then was that the demon race had the intention to gather everyone's power to create another spirit acupoint in the northern underworld continent. Seeing this, he could not help but think that the Shaoqing sect's attack on the middle pillar was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. However, there were advantages and disadvantages. Donghua was surrounded by 3 continents, and its terrain was the lowest. In addition, there were many islands on the sea that were like chains blocking it. As a result, the turbid qi stagnated and entangled. It was naturally easy to create a demon acupoint, which would then give birth to demons and evildoers. According to common sense, this continent should have become a land of yin. Fortunately, there were people from other sects who entered the yin acupoint to eradicate the demons, so they did not bring disaster to the world. These people were the origin of the devil's doctrine in the Donghua continent. However, after staying in the yin for a long time, their temperament was also affected. Later on, their actions became more and more extreme, which led to another disaster. At this time, the Xianmen could only suppress their attacks. After fighting for 1,000 years, the Xianmen won and destroyed the 4 demon acupoints, which led to the situation today. However, the demon acupoint was not like the spiritual acupoint. As long as the geography of the mountain did not change, it would appear on its own without anyone's guidance. Zhang Yan was very curious. Looking at the jade slip, 10,000 years ago, the celestial sect of Xianmen could be said to be everywhere. Although this battle had broken up many sects and caused them to suffer many losses, overall, the celestial sect of Xianmen still had the upper hand. Furthermore, the Devil's Den was no longer as powerful as it was when the 9 continents were first formed. So why not completely destroy the Devil's sect? He continued to read. Just now, he understood. It turned out that after the demons born in the demon acupoint devoured each other, it was extremely easy to give birth to a formless genin demon. Not only was its cultivation comparable to that of an ascended perfected one, it could also steal the human body and devour the soul. This kind of demon was completely inhumane. It only acted according to its own likes and dislikes. It was almost impossible to eliminate. Once it became intelligent, almost no one could control it. Even the cultivators of the devil's doctrine were extremely afraid of it. Once they found any signs of demonic condensation, they would immediately gather and kill it. If the devil's doctrine was completely eradicated, it would require the cultivators of the Xianmen to personally go into battle to deal with this thing. This could be said to be not worth the loss. After Zhang Yan finished reading the jade scroll, it was as if a layer of fog had been lifted from his heart. He had a deep understanding of the battle between the Xian men and demons in the past 10,000 years. If he had not become one of the 10 first seats, he would not have been able to find out about these secrets. But once he sat in this position, he needed to think about the overall situation and prioritize the interests of the sect. Regardless of whether the sect was willing or not, they had to let him know about this matter. After understanding this, the sect could let him understand what needed to be done and how to do it. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and put down the jade scroll. What the Xian men wanted was not to completely eradicate the devil's doctrine. Instead, as long as the 4 demon acupoints were destroyed, the original 16 sects would be maintained, and the Donghua continent would be safe for 10,000 years. Chapter 769. The next day, Zhang Yan came to the floating heavenly palace again. The child had already received his orders, so when he saw him, he led him to the side hall from yesterday. Zhang Yan walked into the inner room and saw sect leader Qin sitting on the jade platform with his eyes closed and a horsetail whisk in his hand. He immediately went forward to greet him. Sect leader Qin opened his eyes and looked at him. He asked gently, "Zhang Yan, have you seen what's written in that jade scroll?" Zhang Yan replied, "Disciple has already seen it. Many of the doubts in my heart have been resolved." Sect leader Qin smiled and said, "I believe you already know what to do, so I won't say much. I've called you here today for another matter. Now that you've reached the 3rd stage of Yuaniing cultivation, you can ask a powerful practitioner in the sect to build an essence hut to protect your physical body. Do you have anyone you like?" Zhang Yan pondered for a moment, then raised his head and asked, "Can the disciple choose?" Sect leader Qin nodded and said, "Of course." Zhang Yan raised his hand and bowed. He asked, "Then can disciple trouble sect leader Jinren to do it?" Sect leader Qin looked at him deeply and smiled. "It's not impossible, but have you really made up your mind?" When a powerful practitioner forged a host artifact for their disciple, it was sowing good karma between them. Compared to becoming a disciple, it was only slightly inferior. If Zhang Yan could ask Meng Zhen or Sun Jinren to build an essence hut for him, they would definitely treat him like a nephew. However, as the sect leader, Qin Mabai had to be impartial in his actions. It was not convenient for him to show himself for some matters, so it would be more beneficial for him to choose a disciple. Zhang Yan's attitude was firm. He said, "Disciple has already made up my mind." Sect leader Qin nodded slowly and said, "This item can be forged in about half a year's time. You just need to go back and wait for news." Zhang Yan said, "Disciple has a matter that I would like to seek sect leader's approval on." Sect leader Qin said amiably, "Go ahead. When I was in Dongxing continent, I accepted a disciple who is now guarding the lower house of the sect. Because I can't teach him all the time, I want to ask sect leader to grant me the Cloud Thousand Snatches sword manual and pass it on to him." Sect leader Qin thought for a while. He said, "I know a thing or two about Dongxing's situation. Your disciple is guarding the outer continent alone. He doesn't have anyone from the same sect to help him, nor does he have a master to rely on. It's really not easy. I can approve your proposal. Bestow him with the title of a true disciple and let him cultivate in peace in the Dongxing continent. Just take good care of the lower house. I will bestow him a true disciple title and let him cultivate in peace in Dongxing continent." In Song Pai's 5 Gong 3 scriptures, if you don't have the guidance of the seniors in the school, even if you take the scripture, it will be useless, most likely you won't be able to master it. However, he only needed sect leader Qin's approval. As for how to cultivate, he could ask Ning Chongxian for it. Sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk, and a letter flew down. He said, "This is my handwriting. With this, you will be able to see sect leader Yu." Zhang Yan took the letter. He bowed and left the floating celestial palace, returning to Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. When he returned, mirror spirit Zhang Jing came to report, "Master, sect leader Yan from Blue Feather Pavilion has come to visit. He is waiting in front of the hall. Do you want to see him?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "News travels fast. He is after all a sect leader. Since he is here, I should meet him." He flicked his sleeves and opened the array door. He stepped in, and when he came out, he was already in the main hall. The three of them had actually arrived at Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake 3 days ago. However, when they heard that there seemed to be a competition for the 10 first seats in Qinsong, they were shocked. As they didn't know what was going on, they were afraid that they would be involved. Thus, they just watched from the outside. When the sect heard that Zhang Yan had already become one of the top 10 disciples in the sect, he was pleasantly surprised. He immediately decided to take advantage of the fact that the news had not yet spread to pay a visit. When they saw Zhang Yan coming out, the three of them hurriedly stood up and bowed. Yan Qing lowered her head and said, "Sorry for disturbing your cultivation." She had cultivated for close to 600 years and barely passed the test to achieve yuanying. She was originally a little happy, but compared to Zhang Yan, she felt inferior. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I already know why sect leader Yan is here. You can go back and tell the sects that you are on good terms with. Since I have taken the position of the 10 first seats, I won't abandon the sections. The disciples who were stationed previously will still be stationed at the sections. I hope that all of you will work together to fight against the devil tribulation." Yan Qing was delighted and thanked him repeatedly. She had been the sect leader for so many years and was experienced in the ways of the world. Since she had received the confirmation and saw that Zhang Yan had no intention of accompanying the guests, she took her leave. When she reached the door, Yan Xiaoyang saw that his mother was deep in thought, as if she was thinking about a difficult matter. He couldn't help but ask, "What is mother thinking about?" "Since Shenren Zhang has already agreed, is there anything you are unhappy about?" Yan Qing sighed, "I am thinking that since Shenren Zhang has returned, it is good to send the disciples to guard again. However, the position of the first seat will be handed over to a fellow sect sooner or later. I am afraid that there will be a change of heart and it will not be very stable." When Yan Xiaoyang heard this, he agreed. With Zhang Yan around, there should be no problems for the next 100 years. However, once he went to the Duzhen Hall, the person who took over his position might not support their small sect. He also frowned and said, "This matter really has to be considered. What does mother think we should do?" Yan Qing said, "I heard that Jinren Zhang has a 5th disciple, Jiang Zheng, who is married to Dan Huizhen of Penyuan sect. The devil's doctrine has been wreaking havoc on the sea for many years. Penyuan sect is powerless to fight back and can only guard behind closed doors. However, after Jinren Zhang returned from the foreign continent, the first thing he did was to go to Penyuan sect to help his disciple. If I betroth your sister to Jinren Zhang's disciple," when Yan Xiaoyang heard this, he jumped up and shouted excitedly, "What? Betroth my sister to someone else?" Yan Qing said unhappily, "What are you shouting for?" Yan Xiaoyang's face turned red. There was an inexplicable feeling in his heart. It was as if he was humiliated and unwilling. He gritted his teeth and said, "I will never agree to betroth my sister to someone else." Yan Qing frowned and said, "I will make the decisions in the pavilion. When is it your turn to speak?" Yan Xie didn't object. She only said quietly, "Since mother says so, does that mean you already have a suitable candidate?" Yan Qing picked up her daughter's hand and patted it. Jinren Zhang's 6th disciple, Han Zuocheng, also has core transformation cultivation. If this matter succeeds, you won't be wronged. Yan Xie thought carefully and said, "Mother's words are reasonable. I'm just afraid that the Clear Nether sect will look down on us for coming from a small sect." Yan Qing smiled and said, "If I didn't have confidence, why would I speak carelessly? I have long since inquired. Jinren Zhang's 6th disciple likes to tame strange beasts and birds to fight. He has already reached the point of obsession and has raised many strange beasts in his cave abode. The founding ancestor of Blue Feather Pavilion was originally a disciple of the South Flower sect. This beast taming and demon subduing art is authentic. We can present this art as a dowry." Yan Xie nodded lightly and said, "I will follow mother's decision." Yan Xiaoyang stared blankly and said with some disbelief, "Sister, are you really going to agree?" Yan Xie said seriously, little brother, if Blue Feather Pavilion can form a relationship with Zhang Yan, it will be the same as forming a good relationship with the Clear Nether sect. Do you understand? Yan Qing praised, you, is still the most reasonable. And now, the Clear Nether Heavenly Lake lineage. Not counting Zhang Yan, 2 of his disciples had achieved yuanying. The second disciple had been in seclusion for decades and was rumored to have a chance of breaking through. It was hard to guarantee that another spiritual master would appear. If they didn't form a relationship before other sects could react, there might not be such an opportunity in the future. At this moment, in the depths of the cave abode, the Clear Nether sect disciple Jin Honglian was sitting cross-legged with his head propped up on his hand, dozing off on a prayer mat. When he heard the ringing of a bell, he couldn't help but shiver and look up. Seeing Han Zuocheng walk in with a white rhinoceros, his eyes widened and he said in shock, "Master, this white rhinoceros's cage and saddle are neat, it must have an original owner. Could it be that Master brought it here in passing?" Han Zuocheng said unhappily, "Don't talk nonsense, how can Master be that kind of person? This white rhinoceros is Tao Xinren's mount, temporarily left with your grandmaster. It's just that your grandmaster saw that I'm good at raising strange beasts, so he gave it to me to look after." Jin Honglian chuckled, revealing an expression of understanding. Han Zuocheng was a casual person and usually didn't have the dignity of a teacher. He never forced his disciples to do anything, so the relationship between master and disciple was quite harmonious and they often joked around. Han Zuocheng took off the white rhinoceros's bridle. Suddenly, he smelled alcohol and asked in surprise, "Do you like to drink?" The white rhinoceros shook its body and shouted, "You have some knowledge, kid. 5 vats of wine every day, not a drop less. Not a single drop less. Otherwise, your immortal's cave might not be safe." Han Zuocheng's expression was a little strange. He glanced at the pool in the cave and shook his head, another drunkard. He turned around and ordered Jin Honglian, "Go to my storehouse and bring 5 vats of fine wine over." Jin Honglian had followed him for a long time and had seen all kinds of monsters with strange tempers, so he was already used to it. He agreed and went to the back of the cave. At this time, a maidservant came in to report, "Master, Daoist Shen has come to visit." Han Zuocheng's expression brightened and he said loudly, "Invite him in quickly." Not long after, Shen Dong walked in and cupped his hands, "Daoist brother Han greets me." Han Zuocheng smiled, "No need to be so polite. Come, sit first. Yesterday, I was summoned by eldest senior sister to have my cultivation checked and couldn't enjoy myself to my heart's content. Today, you have to tell me about that demon refining technique again." Shen Dong smiled and sat down, saying, "I wouldn't dare to disobey." Although he was arrogant, he also knew that in order to establish a foothold here, he had to build a good relationship with the Zhaoyu lineage. And under Zhang Yan, Lu Yanyi and Wei Zihong were both yuanying cultivators, so he felt it was difficult to interact with them. Tian Kun was always in seclusion and didn't go out at all, so he couldn't even see him. The Wang sisters were female cultivators, so he couldn't get too close to them. But Han Zuocheng had the same level of cultivation as him, and he liked rare and strange things. Coincidentally, there were many records in the spirit returning sect, and there was even a technique of using a pot to raise a demon. So he deliberately got close to him, and after a few days, he became familiar with him. The two of them chatted for several hours, and Han Zuocheng was extremely excited, saying, "Senior doesn't have a cave abode yet, right? If you don't mind, you don't have to leave today. Stay in my cave abode and talk through the night, okay?" Shen Dong didn't mind and agreed. Han Zuocheng was even happier. He ordered his servants to prepare a banquet, and they chatted while drinking. After chatting for a while, Shen Dong found a chance and said, "I have a small matter that I need senior's help with." Han Zuocheng had been in the sect for more than 100 years, but there were very few people he was on good terms with. It was rare for him to meet someone he could talk to, so he said, "Junior, please speak. If I can help, I won't refuse." Shen Dong said in a deep voice, "The techniques that I practice require me to fight and kill with others in order to comprehend them. It's just that I don't know the geography of the Donghua continent, so I want to ask Senior for a map so that I can go out and slay demons. Chapter 770. Don't wait at night, it'll be done by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. After the news of Zhang Yan succeeding as one of the 10 first seats spread, those who were on good terms with the sect either sent congratulatory gifts or came in person to congratulate him. A few days later, many small sects that wanted to attach themselves to Qinsung school came to pay their respects, and they even faintly revealed the intention of marrying into Bright Nether Heavenly Lake. However, most of these people only set their sights on the third-generation disciples. Firstly, this matter was relatively easy to accomplish, and secondly, they could form a relationship with Qinsung school without being easily countered by others. Zhang Yan didn't ask about any of this, letting the disciples choose for themselves. A few of them couldn't help but agree. After pondering over the matter for several days, they finally made up their minds and sent someone to probe Han Zhuqing's intentions. Han Zhuqing didn't care at first, but when he heard that Blue Feather Pavilion was willing to hand over the Southern Flower sect's demon-subduing secret technique, he was immediately tempted. However, he was a second-generation disciple, Zhang Yan's seventh disciple. His status wasn't ordinary, and he didn't know if he could make the decision himself, so he answered vaguely for now. Since he couldn't find anyone to discuss with, he invited Shendong and explained the matter in detail. He asked, "Junior brother Shen, do you agree or not?" Shendong thought for a moment, then asked, "Senior brother, are you interested in that fellow Taoist Yen?" Han Zhuqing nodded. Putting aside the secret technique, Yen Siye was also a core transformation cultivator. She was beautiful and had a gentle temperament. In the future, it was extremely likely that she would inherit the position of Blue Feather Pavilion sect master. Where else could he find such a good match? In his heart, he was very willing. Shendong asked curiously, "Then what are you hesitating for?" "Just agree." Han Zhuqing hesitated and said, "It's just about master. But I don't know how to say it." Most disciples wanted nothing more than to stick close to their master, but he was different. Not long after joining the sect, he made a huge mistake and almost implicated his fellow disciples. After that, Zhang Yan went to the 16 sects to compete in swords, and then traveled to Dongxing continent. He had little contact with this master. He was afraid that he would be scolded if he brought up this matter rashly. Shendong saw through it and immediately said, "Senior Marshal Brother Han, why do you have to go and say it yourself? Since Sect Master Yen took the initiative to bring up this matter, it means that they have a request and will naturally find a way to fulfill it. Senior Marshal Brother only needs to give us a definite reply and just wait." Han Zhuqing was enlightened. He said excitedly, "Then I'll go and inform them that they agree to this matter." Shendong grabbed him and said, "Hold on. When did the person from Jade Feather Pavilion tell Senior Marshal Brother about this?" Han Zhuqing answered without hesitation, 2 hours ago. Shendong shook his head and said with a smile, "Senior brother, if you are too anxious, it will not be good. It will make you seem impatient. Let's wait a few days first. It won't be too late to write back." Han Zhuqing nodded and composed himself. "I'll listen to Shidi." Inside the cave, Zhang Yan sat on the couch, holding the disciple register in his hand. He was thinking about arranging for people to be stationed at the various sections. However, they had to pay attention to who they sent. Not only did their cultivation have to be passable, they also had to listen to his orders, so he had to think carefully. He was actually thinking about the people who were called back by Duda. Not only were they experienced, they had also been dealing with various sects for hundreds of years, so it would be convenient for them to help each other. However, these people were arranged by Hu Xian in the past, and some of them were from Xianshui Palace. He could not help but think, it's time to visit Senior Marshal Brother Hua. At this moment, Jingyu came to report that Luo Qingyu had come to visit. He thought for a while, put down the register and came out to welcome him. After a while, he saw a 13 or 14-year-old young man beside Luo Qingyu. After greeting him, he smiled and asked, "Is this Senior Marshal Brother Luo's new disciple?" Luo Qingyu smiled and said, "No, this is my junior martial brother Zhang Shanghong." He has entered the lower house to cultivate, so I still need junior martial brother to take care of him. At most, in a few decades, he would step down from his position as the top 10 disciples and go to the Duzhen Hall to take up the position of an elder. As for the successor, he had to make some arrangements first. If one wanted to compete for the top 10 disciples, he must first become a true disciple. If he did not want to compete, he would have to cultivate in the lower house for a full 16 years before he could enter the upper house. Although Zhang Yan did not care about the lower house, he was still the master of the lower house. Therefore, Luo Qingyu came to greet him. The young man looked honest. He looked at Zhang Yan with curiosity and respect. He came up to him and bowed politely. He did not dare to address him as senior martial brother and only said, "Zhenren Zhang greets you." Zhang Yan nodded and invited the two into the cave. They sat down and talked for a while. Then, Jingyu came to report, "Master, Zhenren Qin is here." Luo Qingyu thought for a while and said, "What a coincidence. Junior martial sister Qin seldom hangs out with her fellow disciples. She must have something to tell you today. I'm afraid I came at the wrong time." Zhang Yan raised his hand and smiled, "Senior martial brother Luo, please sit down." He then turned to Jingyu and said, "Go and invite junior martial sister Qin here." Jingyu quickly accepted the order and went out. Not long after, he heard the jingle of ornaments and a fragrant wind assaulted his nostrils. A slim and graceful young lady with bright eyes and white teeth entered the room. Her hair was combed into 2 buns, and she wore a light cloud robe with wide sleeves. Her waist was tied with a blue water silk sash, and the small sash was adorned with exquisite jade rings. She wore a long skirt that reached her feet, and on top of her head, there was a group of strong clouds gently drifting about. She looked inside and her bright eyes lit up. She bowed and said happily, "Senior martial brother Zhang, long time no see." She then bowed to Luo Qingyu and said, "So senior martial brother Luo is here too." Zhang Yan smiled and stood up, "Junior martial sister, you don't have to be so polite. Sit down and talk." Luo Qingyu also stood up and bowed back. Qin Nan's nature was pure and innocent. Although she had not seen Zhang Yanqiu for many years, there was no distance between them. After they sat down, her curiosity was piqued and she asked about the Dongxing continent. Zhang Yan was not impatient. He smiled and told him what had happened in Dongxing continent. He only avoided talking about the matter of the sky demon because it involved the ancestral master's seal. Luo Qingyu did not know about Zhang Yan's experience over the years. When he heard that Zhang Yan fought with a few cultivators of the 3rd level of Yuanying, he was shocked and admired him. After more than 2 hours, Qin Nan let out a cry and lowered her head. She said embarrassedly, "I almost forgot that I am here today to ask senior martial brother for a favor." Zhang Yan smiled, "Junior martial sister, please speak your mind." Qin Nan said, "Master went into closed-door cultivation 50 years ago. The matter of guarding the devil's cave was handed over to me. However, the number of demons has been increasing over the years. I feel that I can't do what I want, but I don't want to disturb Master's cultivation. After thinking about it, I can only ask senior martial brother for help." She was good friends with Lu Yenny and had asked her for help a few days ago. However, now that the devil's calamity was coming, the demons would appear again soon after they were eliminated. They could not be eliminated and they could not be killed. This was why she was troubled. As the leader of the top 10 disciples, Zhang Yan should be involved in this matter. He nodded, "This is my duty." Qin Nan left her seat and stood up. She curtsied and said joyfully, "Thank you for your help, senior martial brother." Luo Qingyu frowned. He said, "Back then, junior martial brother Zhuang was able to suppress the small devil's cave for 16 years. Now, with junior martial sister Qin Nan's Yuanying cultivation, it is still difficult for her to deal with it. As the devil's calamity deepens, the demons here will become stronger. I have asked Master why not try to eliminate them once and for all. However, Master said that there are plans in place and I don't have to worry about it." Qin Nan nodded, "I have asked Master about this and his reply was similar. They did not understand. However, after Zhang Yan looked at the jade scroll, he knew the reason behind it. The small devil's cave in the Guardian Palace had been there since the time of the fourth headmaster. If it was any other sect, they would probably seal and destroy it in a hurry, but the Dark Azure sect didn't do so. For thousands of years after that, there was a Taoist paradise guarding this place. Nominally, it was to suppress the devil, but secretly, it was trying to attract the turbid spiritual energy from all directions. The intention was to make it a real devil's cave during the devil's calamity. As it was in their own school, it would not take much effort to eliminate all the demons before the 6 main demon sects could react. According to Zhang Yan's knowledge, not only Qinsang School was doing this, but Yuxiao School was also doing the same. Only Shaoqing School did not bother to do so. However, it was not convenient for him to say it out loud. He smiled, there is no need to investigate further. Since deities have said so, there must be a reason behind it. After a pause, he continued, this is a critical time. It is not appropriate to send 1 or 2 cultivators to suppress it. We should find another way. Qin Nan asked curiously, Senior Apprentice Brother, what do you think we should do? Zhang Yan said seriously, now that the devil's flame is raging, we can open up the devil's cave at the bottom of the sea and send our junior disciples there to train. Then, we can obtain the technique of the courtyard of merit. If there are people who kill enough demons, we can also reward them according to their merits. In this way, we can not only increase the cultivation of supernatural powers, but also eliminate the demons. Luo Qingyu was stunned. He secretly thought that this was a great idea. Killing the demons was secondary. Among the disciples of Qinsang School, unless they were true disciples, only they could have a residence on a spiritual island. It was not easy for the rest of the disciples to cultivate. Most of them were under the tutelage of their teachers and friends. Usually, they lived in a place with tens or hundreds of people. The small devil's cave was comparable to a paradise. If they could really open up the door, it would be a good place for them to cultivate. How could the disciples not flock to it? It was hard to say for the disciples of the aristocratic families, but the disciples under the tutelage would definitely be grateful to Zhang Yan. This way, he could easily win the hearts of the people. As for how to pass through the eye of the sea, it was a secondary matter. Any one of them had the means to send their disciples there. Qin Nan said happily, Senior Apprentice Brother, this is a good idea. Our teacher is not an unreasonable person. He will most likely agree. Luo Qingyu reminded, Junior Apprentice Brother, the demon is not a demon or a cultivator from the devil's sect. There is no precedent for killing it. I am afraid that the courtyard of merit will not agree. Zhang Yan sighed and said, I'll talk to them myself. Luo Qingyu thought for a while. This would be beneficial to all the disciples of the sect. The courtyard of merit may not dare to stop them. However, the headmaster would have a headache about how to reward them. Zhang Yan suddenly thought of something and asked, Junior Apprentice Sister Qin Nan, did you see anything unusual in the small devil's cave? Qin Nan thought for a while and shook her head. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. The small devil's cave had existed for thousands of years and the news had long been leaked. He did not believe that the devil's sect could not guess what the Qinsang School was planning. They must have made some arrangements. The more normal it looked, the more suspicious it was. So he said, I have entered the devil's cave twice in the past. Each time, I met the disciples of the devil's sect. Although I killed a few of them, many years have passed. It is hard to guarantee that there will not be any more cultivators from the devil's sect. So before we open the eye of the sea, I need to check it out personally to avoid any accidents. Chapter 771. In front of the flying crane pavilion, Qin Nan was waiting with a young girl. The young girl had delicate features and her hair was combed into 2 buns. She wore a dress with a collar and carried a fluffy white dog in her arms, playing with it from time to time. She raised her head and looked at the sky, saying, Master, Uncle Master will be here soon, right? Qin Nan grunted and said, Your Uncle Master Zhang is a Yuanying 3rd-degree cultivator. If he uses the sword escape technique, he will be here in less than half an hour. The young girl could not help but look envious and said with longing, flying in the sky and burrowing into the ground, how carefree. I wonder when I can do that. Qin Nan thought about it seriously and said, it's not difficult. With your talent, you can do it after 10 years of cultivation. The young girl let out an ah and drooped her head. She said in distress, so long. Just as he was speaking, he suddenly heard the sound of a sword piercing through the air. A bright sword light came from the west, coming from afar in an instant. When it reached the top of the Shoming Palace, it suddenly stopped. The clouds in the sky were torn apart by the dancing qi. For a moment the sky was clear as if it had been washed, and then the light disappeared, revealing a brave and resolute Taoist with a clear light shrouding his body. He waved his sleeves and floated down on the clouds. The young girl widened her eyes and looked at the sky without blinking. She thought, senior sister always said that Uncle Master Peng is handsome and refined, a dragon among men. Uncle Master Zhang is much better looking than him. While she was thinking, she heard a voice beside her ear, Qing Qin, why are you not greeting Uncle Master Zhang? She came back to her senses and blushed. She hurriedly came forward and greeted with a soft voice, Martial niece Meng Qing Qin greets Uncle Master. Qin Nan said, senior brother. This is my new disciple, and he has only been in the sect for a year. She doesn't know the rules, and if she is rude, please don't blame her. Zhang Yan glanced at her and found that she was a beauty with a divine aura. She should be one of the best chosen by the Guardian Palace. He nodded to her and then looked at Qin Nan. He said, junior sister mentioned in the letter that Jinren Peng has already agreed to open and close the Eye of the Sea. However, there are still some things that you want to tell me in person. I wonder why. Qin Nan said softly, my teacher said that in the past, every disciple who goes to the Sea Eye has to pay 500 spirit shells. Now, for the sake of the sect, this rule can be changed. However, those who have not reached the core formation stage are not allowed to stay on the island. One person needs to pay 100 spirit shells to enter the Eye of the Sea to kill the devil. I can't disobey my master's order, so I hope senior martial brother can forgive me. After that day, she went to Immortal Peng's father to report this matter. Just as she had expected, Immortal Peng did not oppose it. Instead, he quite approved of it. Although the Guardian Palace had Taoist Grotto Heaven presiding over it, it was impossible for him to do everything personally. Furthermore, there were very few disciples in the palace. In the past, the task of suppressing the devils was handed over to the top 10 disciples. Even if it was a disciple from a different sect, it wouldn't matter. However, as soon as the Sea Eye was opened, many junior disciples would swarm over. After all, the Guardian Palace was a place of quiet cultivation and could not allow noise. Therefore, this rule was set. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I see. This is reasonable. Even if Immortal didn't say it, I still wanted to do so. The purpose of opening the Sea Eye was to let the disciples sharpen their state of mind and martial arts so that they could deal with the devil tribulation. However, if it was given out for no reason, it would inevitably feel that it was easy to get. There would definitely be disciples who did not cherish this opportunity. It was only right to add restrictions. Qin Nan smiled sweetly and said, I know that senior martial brother won't be unreasonable. Hearing this, Zhang Yan's heart moved slightly. He felt that there seemed to be something behind it. However, since it was settled, there was no need to delve into it. He brought up another matter, junior martial sister, do you remember the names of the disciples who have entered the Devil's Cave to cultivate these years? Qin Nan smiled and said, I remember. She raised her hand gently and took a petal. She circled her finger in her white hand and drew, forming a spell scroll. She then handed it over and said, Senior martial brother, the names of all the disciples who have entered the Sea Eye to cultivate in the past 200 years are all in it. Zhang Yan took it and took a look at it. He remembered all the names and said, Junior martial sister, I'll head to the Sea Eye now. Goodbye. He bowed and looked in the direction of the Guardian Palace. He then used the 5 elements escape technique and turned into a clear light and dived into the water. There were two people sitting in a flying pavilion in the Guardian Palace. One of them was wearing a tall hat and a wide belt, looking elegant. He was staring at the flying crane pavilion with a gloomy face. The person sitting in front of him was Daoran, who was in his 50s. He wore a carefree scarf and an open-necked shirt. His eyes were half closed and he was drunk. When he saw his companion looking outside, he also looked in that direction. He narrowed his eyes and said deliberately, "Dao brother Peng, Jinren Zhang is indeed extraordinary. He has cultivated to the third layer of yuanying in less than 300 years. He is indeed powerful, very powerful." Dao brother Peng snorted and slammed the table. He said, "When Senior Marshal Brother Qi saved him from the Devil's Cave, I met him once. He was just a Xian Light Realm disciple back then, so I didn't think much of him. Who would have thought that he would have such an opportunity after 200 years? Daoran looked at him and raised his wine cup. He said with a smile, "Heaven's will is unpredictable. Dao brother Peng, you don't have to worry about it. If you had gone to the sword competition with Jinren Qi back then, you would have been sitting in this position long ago." Dao brother Peng's heart twisted. This was the thing he regretted the most in his life. He was a member of the Peng clan and the son-in-law of the Qin clan. He was in the same generation as Qi Yuntian and was one of the top 10 disciples. When the Qinsang school was in chaos, he happened to be visiting a friend outside, so he was lucky enough to escape. However, when he heard the news, he hid outside and did not dare to return to the mountain because he was afraid that the fierce person would come after him. It was only when Qi Yuntian returned from the sword competition that he sneaked back into the sect. Although he did this to protect himself, the Qin clan was greatly disappointed in him. They ordered him to be removed from his position and supported Hu Xian, Fang Zhenlu, and the others instead. Now, even though he'd already entered the third level of the nascent soul realm, he could only hold the position of an elder on duty in Daylight Hall. So when he saw Zhang Yan surpass him, he couldn't help but feel jealous and resentful. Daoran drank the wine in his hand and poured himself another cup. He said, "Dao brother, why are you so depressed? Don't you know that once the devil's calamity comes, it will be your chance?" Dao brother Peng said, "Now he is one of the top 10 chiefs. Although the title of elder sounds good, I can't order anyone except the disciples. What can I do?" Daoran laughed and said, "Dao brother is Jinren Peng's nephew. You are also the son-in-law of the Qin clan. How many people are better than senior brother? Jinren Du has retired from the position of chief. In the next 100 years, your Qinsang school will be controlled by master and disciple. I don't believe that the other Zenrens will be convinced. It's just that no one can compete with Jinren Zhang." After a pause, he lowered his voice and said with a hint of temptation, "Dao brother, if you stand out now, you can compete with Jinren Zhang. As long as you stand firm and make a few more contributions, I'm afraid that the position of temple master will belong to you in the future." Dao brother Peng sneered and said, "Don't think that I can't guess what you are thinking. If your Yuanyang sect wants to take advantage of the devil's calamity, my Qinsang school will be in chaos. I'm afraid that will be what you want, right?" Daoran admitted, "A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Daoran, that is my plan. But if you don't have this intention, what can I say?" Daoist Peng fell into deep thought. Although he had cultivated for nearly 600 years, he was still a Daoist. Although he had been cultivating for nearly 600 years, he didn't have any outstanding achievements, and the Qin clan didn't support him anymore. If there were no accidents, it would be almost impossible for him to see the cave in this life. But if he could make some achievements in the devil's calamity, he might still have a chance. He also knew that among the disciples of the aristocratic families, there was no one who could compete with Zhang Yan. It was true that there was no one who could contend with Zhang Yan. If he could grasp this point, then as long as he did one or two great things, he might be able to regain the favor of the Qin clan. After thinking for a while, he was a little tempted, but he couldn't show it on his face. His face darkened, and he pretended to be unhappy and said, "In the future, don't mention this in front of me, Dao friend." After saying that, he stood up, waved his sleeves and left. Daoren looked at the leaving figure with a playful expression. He poured himself another cup of wine and drank it slowly, muttering to himself, "There will be a good show to watch." Inside the hole at the bottom of the sea, the waterfall that was rushing down suddenly surged. The water was like a curtain, it actually separated from the two sides, and then a clear light that connected the top and bottom like a pillar came down. With a rumbling sound, it rushed to the stone platform below. Even the stalagmites on the top of the cave were shaken down a lot. There seemed to be a clear light turning. Zhang Yan then walked out and stepped into the cave. His gaze swept back and forth. It had been more than 200 years since he last came here, but this place was brighter and more spacious than before. At this moment, he was standing at the entrance of the sea eye, but the density of the spiritual chi was similar to that of the clear nether heavenly lake. He raised his eyebrows. This was a place that was beneficial to the devil sect, and he didn't believe that they wouldn't make a fuss about it. However, since he wanted to open the sea eye and let the disciples come down to train, whether or not there were devil sect cultivators sneaking in, he had to investigate thoroughly. With a turn of his Xian Qi, a ball of green cloud appeared under his feet. With his sleeves behind his back, he released a strong wind and walked towards the depths of the devil cave. This time, it seemed to have set off a violent storm. As a cultivator of the third level of Yuanying, his mana was far more tyrannical than those of the same generation. The spiritual machine that he controlled covered a radius of 10 miles. Wherever he passed by, many demons didn't even have time to dodge before they were crushed into broken essence. After entering a depth of 10,000 feet, his figure paused and slightly restrained the chi dynamic on his body. He stood at a distance and closed his eyes for a moment. Then, he casually grabbed something out of thin air. It was like a cloud of mist, and its appearance was constantly changing. Sometimes it was a man, sometimes it was a woman, and its entire body was also uncertain. It was a phantom demon that was born from the Yin essence of the netherworld. This was what he was looking for. The devil cave was wide, and if there were really devil sect cultivators here, they would most likely have a secret technique to hide, and might not be able to find them. However, even if it could hide from him, it could not hide from this demon. As long as this thing sensed vitality, it would definitely change its appearance. However, no matter how it changed, it would definitely imitate a living person, and would not create something out of nothing. As this thing in the devil cave could not be killed completely, it would regenerate after being killed. Even if he wanted to guard against it, there was no way he could. With a turn of his divine sense, a square jade seal suddenly flew up, turned in midair, and released a ray of brilliance to shine down. After looking for a while, he sneered. As the head of the disciples, he had the power to punish and supervise the disciples in the sect. This head of the jade seal, other than the top 10 disciples and the elders in the sect, could be used to check the name, master, and appearance of any disciple. Even the true disciples were no exception. However, under this light, there was an appearance that he could not identify. It was not that there were outsiders who had sneaked in these years, but it was very likely that there were devil sect cultivators hiding here. Chapter 772. In the depths of the devil's cave, a white-robed cultivator with a high bun was fleeing in fear. He stopped in front of a stone wall, bowed, and said hurriedly, "Your Excellency, there's movement in the eye of the sea. It seems that Qinsang School has sent cultivators down to investigate again." After a while, the stone wall shook, and then the dry and hard dust fell from it, revealing a pair of blood-red eyes. He said in a hoarse voice, "Haven't there been people coming down every year for many years? You just need to be careful. Why did you wake me up?" The white-robed cultivator heard the displeasure in his voice, and quickly explained, "It's not that I wanted to disturb your Excellency, it's just that the person who came down this time is different from before. Not only is his magic power tyrannical, but he has also been going down for dozens of miles. He seems to have sensed something." "Oh." The person who was addressed as Your Excellency was also moved, and a few more pieces of dust fell from his face. After thinking for a moment, he said in a cold voice, "It seems that your martial uncle was careless and made a mistake. But it doesn't matter, he doesn't know that I'm waiting here. Go and hide yourself, and don't let the person who came find you, or else I won't be able to save you." The white-robed cultivator said in a low voice, "Yes, disciple will take his leave." After bowing, he turned around and left in a hurry. After he left, the person who was addressed as the Venerable One suddenly shook his body and created a gust of wind. The wind swept away all the dirt that covered him and revealed his appearance. It was a skinny Taoist of unknown age. His eyes were deep, and his hair was draped over his shoulders. His cheeks were sunken, and he looked like a withered ghost. He wore a gray feather cloak, and as he lifted his eyelids, 3 blood-red clouds floated out. They swayed and flickered faintly. They were like ghost candles. He shook his head and recalled the nearly 300 strands of his consciousness that he had released. The Devil's Doctrine cultivators divided their consciousness to go out and hunt devils. This could make their cultivation progress faster, but the drawbacks were not small. Once there were too many strands of consciousness, it would make people dizzy and confused. Even with Yuaniing cultivation, 300 was the limit. 300 was already the limit. If he was not careful, he could easily become a fool. However, he was in the territory of Qinsang school, so he had to seize every opportunity to increase his strength, so he couldn't care too much about this. As his soul was full, his spirit gradually lifted, and his mind gradually became clear. At this moment, however, he realized that something was amiss. He thought to himself, something's not right. I remember that the last time the Qinsang school sent someone down was a month ago. Why did they send someone again so soon after arriving? I'm afraid the commotion this time is a little abnormal. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. After hesitating for a long time, he took out a copper mirror, bit the tip of his tongue, and spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood essence on it. Not long after, a blurry silhouette immediately appeared in the mirror. After a few glances, the silhouette disappeared. However, his eyes widened and he stood up in shock, saying, "Could this person be Zhang Yan? Didn't this person go out to travel? Why are you here?" Because he was cultivating in the catacombs, and in order to monopolize this devil's cave, he deliberately cut off contact with his fellow disciples. As a result, he was isolated from the outside world. He did not know that Zhang Yan had returned to the mountain gate a month ago, and had taken over the position of first seat of the top 10 disciples. However, even if he knew about this, he would not have thought that he would ignore the chaos outside, and instead focus his attention on this little devil's cave. His expression was unusually solemn, and he thought to himself, this person's methods are not trivial. Back then, even people like junior brother Gao were killed by him. Now that more than 100 years have passed, his cultivation must have improved again. Going against him is not a wise move, however, his purpose of coming here was about to be achieved, and he was reluctant to give up now. After thinking hard for a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, "I'll hide from him for now. If it really doesn't work, then I can only think of a way to leave this place, wait for the limelight to pass, and then find a chance to come back." After coming up with an idea, he turned around, turned into a bloody light, and flew away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. After Zhang Yan went deep into the little devil's cave, he first walked to the entrance of the cave that led to Shaozhi Mountain. This place had long been sealed to prevent the Devil Doctrine's disciples from coming. Every time Qin Nan, Lu Gongyuan, and Yan Yi went down to the eye of the sea, they would specially come back to take a look to see if the seal had been broken. After he personally examined it, he did not find any traces of it having been tampered with. However, the earth-eating qi in the little devil's cave was like a dense spider web, and the qi activity was connected everywhere. Otherwise, it would not have been able to form a spiritual eye due to the excessive accumulation of spiritual qi. As long as the Devil Doctrine's cultivators knew the general location of this place, they only needed to follow the qi activity, and there would be a way to find a gap to sneak in. If other people were here, it would be difficult to find their whereabouts, but Zhang Yan had his own ways. Relying on the speed of his flying escape, and the fact that the qi activity could sense more than 10 miles away, he planned to use a few days to go around the entire Little Devil's Cave a few times. This move was purely relying on his own vigorous magic power, crushing all the way. The other party would either choose to retreat and escape, or come up to fight. Other than that, once he bumped into them, any method of concealment would be useless. After traveling for half a day, he really found something. More than 20 miles away, a treacherous spiritual vigor was rushing towards the southeast direction. Chen Shi immediately circulated his profound cultivation and utilized the minor universe escape technique to pursue that person, and it wasn't long before he'd caught up to that person. When he raised his head to look, he saw a blood-red radiance flying swiftly ahead. However, that person seemed to have never expected that Chen Shi would arrive so quickly, and he let out a wild cry before his figure shook and suddenly transformed into over 10 blood souls that dispersed in all directions. Zhang Yan was slightly surprised, but he did not chase after it. He only used his Xian Qi and immediately used the Forbidden Lock technique. In an instant, a huge spiritual vigor spread out, covering a radius of 10 miles, like an inescapable net, and all the blood souls were restrained at the same time. Then, he shook his sleeve, and a bright sword light flew out, spinning in the air as if it was going to slash down. One of the blood souls was instantly shocked, and said, "Zhenren Zhang, don't attack, I'm willing to surrender, I'm willing to surrender." As he spoke, the person withdrew his magic power, and revealed his original appearance. Zhang Yan rolled up his sleeve and pulled the person in front of him. He saw that the person's appearance was considered delicate and decent, but it was different from the Huanma. Obviously, there was more than one devil's sect that had sneaked into this place. Zhang Yan stared at the person's face and said, "You know I." The person's body trembled, and he said, "Zhenren Zhang is the number 1 in the 18-sect sword duel, and your drawing has already spread to the 6 sections. How can I not know?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly. "I see that the escape technique that you used is somewhat similar to the blood transformation escape technique. Are you a disciple of the Blood Soul sect?" The person sighed and said dejectedly, "Yes, I'm Sun Baixiang, a disciple of the Blood Soul sect. I originally wanted to borrow the spiritual qi of this place to cultivate the supernatural power of the sect, but I didn't expect to run into the hands of Zhenren Zhang." Zhang Yan thought for a while, and he asked again, "How many of your fellow disciples followed you here?" Sun Baixiang smiled bitterly. "When I came here, I brought a total of 3 disciples, but because their cultivation was low, they all died in the hands of the demons, and now I'm the only one left." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. It was difficult to determine whether the person's words were true or not, but it was no longer important. He only needed to act according to the previous method, and even if there were still people hiding here, he would be able to force them out sooner or later. After he asked where the person came from, he shook his sleeves, and a torrential stream of water was released, and the person was swept into it. Then, he rode on the light and went straight in that direction. After traveling for an hour, he found the path. The path went straight to the surface, and it was less than 5 feet high. The 4 walls were smooth, and it could be seen that the person who came here had opened it up with mana. He sneered, and immediately threw out a few formation flags, and set them up in the surroundings. Once the restriction was set up, even if a Yuanian cultivator wanted to break through, it would not be easy. If the person who came here did not leave an escape route, it would be like catching a turtle in a jar. After setting it up, he circled around on the spot, rode on the green cloud, and went to other places to investigate. On the other side, the skinny Taoist saw this scene from the mirror, and his expression changed greatly. This was equivalent to cutting off his escape route, and he regretted not leaving earlier just now, but now even if he wanted to leave, he could not. After his expression changed a few times, he gritted his teeth hatefully and took out a glazed jade bottle. Within the bottle were 2 half-inch tall people curled up together. It was a pair of crystalline beads. However, upon closer inspection, each of the beads contained a woman with incomparably fair skin. She was completely naked, and her cheeks were like snow. Her expression was delicate and charming. He looked at it a few times, and his eyes were full of regret, and he muttered to himself, "What a pity, if I could find another 1,000-year-old true demon, and refine all 3 of them together, I would have a chance to peek into the 3rd major realm. At that time, even that Zhang Yan might not be my opponent. However, the situation now is critical, and I have to deal with this first before I have a chance to talk about the future. Originally, I only wanted to use it to make up for the missing link, and it seems that this is the will of the heavens. Every cultivator had their own strengths and weaknesses, and everyone wanted to make up for it perfectly, so that they would not be forced into a disadvantageous position in a battle. However, it was too difficult to do so. Unless it was a direct disciple of the sect, and there was someone from the heavenly abode to manage it for them, they would have to find a way to slowly make up for the missing link. This would take a long time, and many people would die before they could wait until then. The skinny Taoist's purpose for coming here was to find 2 true demons to make up for his shortcomings. Once he succeeded, he dared not say that he would be able to fight against the cultivators of the 3rd major realm of Yuanying in the future, but with 2 more blood spirits that were similar to his cultivation level, the techniques he could use would immediately increase. At least before his cultivation level entered a higher realm, there would be no obvious flaws that he could find. If it wasn't for the fact that he was greedy and wanted to improve himself, he wouldn't be trapped here. He looked at the 2 beads reluctantly, and in the end, he made up his mind. He pursed his lips and inhaled. A blood light wrapped around the beads and flew into his mouth. When his breath stabilized, he meditated and closed his eyes to cultivate. As long as he consumed the beads refined by the true demons and nourished them with his blood, they could be turned into his own blood spirits in an instant. After a few breaths, the high cloud above his head was tumbling, and blood waves gushed out. Gradually, they condensed into 2 solid human silhouettes. At this moment, his mind changed, and the 2 blood spirits floated in front of him. Seeing that their appearance was exactly the same as his own, even the subtle expressions were the same, he was not satisfied. At this moment, he suddenly felt a surge of spiritual vigor from afar. He knew that Zhang Yan was not far from here, and he knew that he could not delay any longer. With a strange whistle, he soared into the sky, and the 2 blood spirits followed suit. The 3 blood lights suddenly separated in mid-air, and flew in different directions. Chapter 773. The skinny Taoist was only at the 2nd level of Yuanying. He knew that he had no chance of winning against Zhang Yan, who was able to defeat Feng Haiyang. Thus, he didn't have any thoughts of fighting him. He was just thinking about how to get out of this place as soon as possible. His plan was to use the blood soul to confuse Zhang Yan and lure him deeper into the demon cave. Then, he would sneak back to the entrance of the cave and use all his strength to break the formation flag. Then, he would escape before Zhang Yan arrived. He was confident that he had the blood transformation escape technique. As long as he was 1 step ahead, he didn't need to be afraid of the other party chasing after him. Therefore, as soon as he went to the sky, he identified a direction and hurriedly retreated far away, only leaving behind a blood soul that looked exactly like him. He raised his voice and said, "Are you Zhenren Zhang of Wucang? Blood Soul Sect's Yuanqi Elder Lu Nansong is here. I am willing to learn from you." Yuanqi was one of the 4 pools of the Blood Soul sect. Its position in the sect was similar to the 3 great halls of Qinsang School. He shouted out to make the opponent worry. Zhang Yan heard the voice from afar and was surprised. He didn't care about the identity of the person. Now, he was more or less certain. Just now, the cave that was blocked by his formation flag was the only way for the other party to enter and exit this place. If not, there was no need for him to jump out in such a hurry. He could hide in the dark and escape from another place. His body flashed and he turned into a rainbow light, flying towards the source of the voice. After chasing for a while, he sensed something in his aura. He immediately waved his sleeves and used the heaven and earth lock technique, locking the other party in place 20 miles away. The moment he used the technique, he immediately noticed that the other party's spiritual power was far weaker than his, so he used the 5-element escape technique. He reached out and grabbed outwards. In the blink of an eye, he turned around. He threw it at his feet. Looking down, he saw that the other party was a skinny Daoran. Although he was caught, his expression was calm and he didn't panic at all. Zhang Yan had fought with the disciples of the Blood Soul sect many times, so he was familiar with them. He knew that the cultivators of this sect could use their blood to transform into their own appearance. The person standing in front of him was most likely not the real one. Therefore, he didn't say much. After memorizing its appearance, he waved his hand and dozens of purple lightning bolts flew out. After flashing for a while, they immediately exploded into pieces. After finishing off the blood soul, he raised his head. Sweeping his eyes around, he saw that the depths of this little devil's cave was filled with countless holes and twists and turns. The other party had been hiding here for a long time and was more familiar with the terrain than he was. Going up to kill him was the worst plan. He pondered for a moment. With that, he had a plan. He turned around and rode the cloud back. Not long after, he found a big stone in front of the hole where the formation flag was placed just now. He sat cross-legged and took out a talisman. He used his magic power and placed it on the talisman. He reached out and a ray of spiritual light flew out. This was Qinsang School's territory after all. Since he had confirmed that there was a demonic cultivator here, as long as he blocked the entrance, as the first seed of the 10 disciples, he could summon the other disciples to surround and kill this person. The blood soul that Lu Nansong sent out was no weaker than the Yuanying cultivators, but it was killed in less than a minute. He was shocked. How can this Zhang Yan's cultivation be so high? He can actually use the heaven and earth lock technique. Could it be that he has already cultivated to the 3rd stage of Yuanying? He knew how powerful a 3rd stage Yuanying cultivator was. Those who had not reached this stage would not be able to fight against him. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. He retreated tens of miles and sent out dozens of blood souls to lure this person somewhere else. But after a long while, none of the blood souls found any trace of this opponent. He didn't find it strange. He quickly took out the bronze mirror and spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. The scenery slowly appeared in the mirror. He took a look and saw that Zhang Yan was actually sitting in front of the hole. How could he not guess what he was trying to do? His face instantly became extremely ugly. This retreat to advance had messed up his entire plan. Lu Nansong frowned. He closed his eyes and thought for a long time. He sneered, "Don't think that you can trap me like this." He turned his mind and used the blood transformation escape technique. He flew in a direction. About 4 hours later, he arrived at a place. This place was the cave door that led to Shaozhi Mountain. After he landed, he circulated his energy in his eyes and looked at the seal. After a while, he sat down cross-legged and took out the bamboo chips to deduce the method to break the formation. He was an expert in formations. In less than an hour, he found the key point. He immediately took out a pair of dragon-headed golden halberds from his sleeves. He raised his hand and held them in midair. He then raised his hand and pointed forward. With a strange whistling sound, the halberds fiercely chiseled down. A muffled sound was heard and a restriction was broken. He sneered. Originally, he was afraid that once the restriction was broken, he would alarm the people in the Guardian Palace. Just now, he didn't dare to do anything. But now, he didn't have any scruples. If Zhang Yan didn't come to stop him, he would need at most half a day to break this place before the Qinsang cultivators arrived and escape. If they came here, the other entrance was left unguarded. He could send another true demon blood soul to break the restriction. When the formation door was attacked, an alarm was immediately sent out. Zhang Yan, who was in the devil's cave, sensed it immediately. It was not hard to guess Lu Nansong's intention for making such a big commotion. He thought for a while and came up with a countermeasure. He turned his body and used the Dharma access of the truth fixation scripture to leave a fake body in the same place. He then hid himself and used the 5 elements escape technique to travel underground. After Lu Nansong attacked the formation for a while, he sacrificed his blood and used the bronze mirror to secretly spy on Zhang Yan. He saw that he was sitting there and didn't move. He couldn't help but wonder, does this person think that I can't break this restriction? Or is he playing some other trick? He pondered for a while. It wasn't that there was no trick in Xianmen, but he had to guard against it. Thus, he shook his body and created more than 10 blood souls to fly back to where he came from. They set up an ambush, the furthest one was 100 miles away. This was not to attack the enemy, but to be on guard. In his opinion, if Zhang Yanguo was using a deceptive tactic, then when he came over secretly, he would definitely be noticed by his blood soul in advance, and then he would be able to be on guard in advance. After doing this, he felt that he didn't miss anything, so he calmed down and attacked the restriction in front of him with all his might. However, he didn't expect that Zhang Yan was using the earth escape technique, and the blood souls couldn't detect him. Although Zhang Yan's earth escape technique wasn't as fast as the sword escape technique, but he didn't need to travel through the twists and turns of the cave. So, he didn't slow down by much. After about half a day, he got closer and he sensed more than 100 similar chi dynamics within a 30-mile radius. With so many blood souls, he was sure that Lu Nansong's real body was hiding among them. So, he didn't go forward to check one by one. He shouted and released the heaven and earth escape technique. In an instant, a huge spiritual vigor shrouded the area and suppressed the hundreds of chi dynamics. Then, with a change of mind, more than 10 sword gleams flew out. Like lightning, they killed in all directions. Wherever they passed, the blood souls were destroyed. Lu Nansong saw that the restriction was about to be broken, and he was happy. Suddenly, he felt his body stiffen, and he was surrounded by a huge spiritual vigor. He knew something was wrong. But he didn't expect Zhang Yan to be able to suppress the spiritual vigor of dozens of miles. Looking at the flying sword, it seemed that it wouldn't take long for him to find this place. He couldn't care about anything else. He quickly gathered all his mana and used the blood dissipation technique to escape. But this movement of his instantly exposed his location. Zhang Yan's gaze swept out like cold bolts of lightning as he shouted coldly, and then he immediately fused with his sword and transformed into a brilliant ray of sword light that shot straight towards Qin Shi. All the rocks on his path were easily penetrated like rotten wood, and they were unable to obstruct the sword chi that moved forward in the slightest. Even though Lu Nansong had the superior escape technique, the difference in their mana was huge. When he was escaping, it was like he was trapped in a swamp, and he was slow and elusive. After half a mile, he was caught up by Zhang Yan before he could get rid of the lock and use his mana. When he saw the sword light approaching, yet he was unable to dodge, his entire body trembled, and he immediately shook off the 3 clouds above him to protect his chest. After that, with a command in his heart, a jade talisman with the face of a ghost flew out, and it emitted a treasured glow that was like the glow of dawn as it overlapped and lay horizontally on the path he came from. The sword gleam arrived in the blink of an eye, like a rainbow arrow. With a crack, the jade talisman was smashed into powder, and the 3 clouds were broken at the same time. There was a bloody hole in Lu Nansong's chest, and he was sent flying with his head raised. Even though his injuries weren't light, he'd managed to preserve his life from this earth-shattering attack. Heaving a sigh of relief, he hurriedly activated his secret technique. With a turn of his divine soul, he wrapped all the blood essence in his body, and a ray of blood-red light shot out from the turtle gate. In the blink of an eye, it dashed out at an extremely fast speed towards Zhang Yan. However, his body was like a punctured bag, and it shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. This technique of his was called the Han Yang Release True technique, and it could sacrifice one's lifespan as the price to shoot out like a blood arrow. If it hit the opponent, it could immediately destroy the opponent's spirit, and if the opponent's cultivation was higher than the opponent's, it could even take over the opponent's body. Seeing that it was coming, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he opened his mouth slightly. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of purple gas, and with a sudden leap, it turned into a purple thunderbolt, and hit the blood light halfway. With a bang, the blood light immediately exploded, and turned into countless scattered essence chi, slowly dissipating in the heaven and earth. At the same time, 100 miles away, a white-robed cultivator was hiding in the depths of the Little Devil acupoint, but all of a sudden, he clutched his throat and let out a painful cry as he fell from midair. Countless talismans flashed on his robes, and wisps of black gas emitted from his clothes. The black gas then converged into 7 strands and drilled into his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. He struggled and convulsed for a while before he stopped. After 10 breaths, he slowly stood up again, but the spirit in his eyes was like a different person, and he faintly said, Liang Er, don't blame me for taking over your body. If you don't die, I, Lu Songnan, will not live. This was his last technique, called the blood-soul-yin conversion technique, and it could be used on the body of a disciple, and then attached a strand of spirit to it. If the body of the disciple was killed, he could take over the body for his own use, and use it to escape from the disaster. This white-robed cultivator was carefully selected from his people, and not only was his bloodline compatible, his aptitude was also not bad. If not for this, he would not have brought him here. If he could escape, and use a few hundred years, he might have the chance to slowly refine his cultivation back. But now, he was only a core formation cultivator. Even if Zhang Yan did not come to search for him, he could not leave for a while, so he could only borrow a magic treasure to hide, and wait for another opportunity in the future. Chapter 774. Once Lu Nansong's blood was gone, his body turned into a skeleton, leaving only a thin layer of skin covering his body. Zhang Yan thought for a while, stretched out his hand, and took the person's sleeve. He suspected that there were still cultivators of the devil's sect here that had not been eliminated, so he wanted to see if he could deduce 1 or 2 clues from the things they carried with them. It would be best if there were letters or things like talismans. After flipping through, he found a smooth palm-sized jade plate. He took it out and saw the words, Yuan Qi Yi from below, on it, and, Exalted Duty Lu, on the back. This meant that this person was indeed an elder of Yuan Qi, and he was a cultivator of the second stage of Yuanying. That was why he was ranked with the word Yi, which meant that his status was not low. The 4 pools of the Shueshua sect were divided into the Blood Pool, Calamity Pool, Yuan Qi, and Remnant Pool. In terms of strength, it was said that Yuan Qi was only ranked 3rd, and spiritual master Ru Huang who wreaked havoc in the world was the master of the Calamity Pool. After keeping the jade plate, he continued to flip through, and found 4 to 5 magical weapons. They were just spiritual weapons, and there was not a single Xian weapon. Most of them were vicious and sinister items, which did not match Xuanmen's cultivation method. Hence, he did not look at them much, and only looked into the deepest part of the sleeve. His spiritual opportunity was blocked, and he hit a layer of seal. His interest was immediately piqued, and he was so cautious even when he placed it in his sleeve. It was obvious that the things inside were not simple. He activated his mana and in less than half a breath's time, he broke the seal. In an instant, a dense spiritual energy leaked out as if it was going to rush out from his sleeve. He was already prepared for it. With a turn of his spiritual opportunity, he suppressed all of it. Just by touching the chi, he felt that the 300+ heavy nether water in his aperture jumped. It seemed like it was going to jump out, and it wanted to mix with the spiritual chi. It was very similar to the situation when he accidentally refined the drop of heavy nether water. He could not help but feel moved, and when he looked inside, he found out that it was a bag full of black essence beads. This item was something that Lu Nansong had spent countless efforts over the past 200 years, continuously gathering the netherworld essence from the depths of the ground to refine. It was originally for when he had cultivated to the 3rd stage realm, he would return to practice a powerful divine ability. However, after abandoning his physical body, he also abandoned this item. Zhang Yan took out one of the pellets. After sensing it for a moment, he smiled. He didn't think that he would have such a harvest on this trip. With a flick of his sleeve, he put all the pellets into his bag. He threw out a bolt of lightning and destroyed the rotten body. Then, he soared into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds as he flew back the way he came. Not long after, he saw several dozen streaks of spiritual light flying in his direction, and the one leading them was Qin Nan. Behind her were more than 30 disciples of the Guardian Palace, but a Taoist with a high hat and a wide belt beside her caught his attention. Zhang Yan could tell at a glance that this person was traveling with his Dharmakaya. Just like him, he was also a Yuanying 3rd grade cultivator. It was just that he had some impression of her face. He remembered that he had once met this person outside the Guardian Palace. Qin Nan also saw him from afar. She immediately sped up, and when she was close to him, she ordered her disciples to stay behind and came up alone. Wan Fu said, Senior Marshal Brother, I've received your message talisman and immediately brought my disciples here. May I know what you need us to do? Zhang Yan briefly explained the situation and then said, I suspect that there are still cultivators from the Devil's Doctrine hiding here. I need to investigate thoroughly. Junior Marshal Sister, please guard this place for a day. I will send people here tomorrow to clean up this place. Qin Nan readily agreed, little sister understands. At this moment, the Taoist suddenly smiled and floated over, saying, Junior Marshal Brother Zhang is worthy of being the head of the top 10 disciples. You found out that there are cultivators from the Devil's Doctrine here the moment you arrived. However, there is no need for Junior Marshal Sister Qin to worry about such a small matter. As Jinren Peng's nephew, I can be considered as half a member of the Guardian Palace. I will naturally do my part in this matter. Zhang Yan turned to look at him. How should I address this fellow disciple? The Taoist bowed and said, I am Peng Yuzhou. I am currently cultivating in the Daylight Hall. So it is Elder Peng of the Daylight Hall. Zhang Yan looked at him and said with a faint smile, since Elder Peng intends to take over this matter, I will naturally allow it. However, I have to say in advance that the Devil's calamity is fierce and we cannot be careless. This matter involves the lives of my Qinsang disciples. If anything goes wrong, I will have to punish someone. Peng Yuzhou saw that he agreed and was secretly delighted. He had already made up his mind. First, he would arrange for people to investigate a little. Then, he would secretly order people to publicize and exaggerate the matter. He would try his best to take a part of the merit of opening the eye of the sea to himself. That way, he would not need to spend much effort to win over many people. As for the last sentence of Zhang Yan, he did not take it to heart. There were demons everywhere in the Devil's Cave. There was no reason for people to not die. Even if they did not get rid of all the Devil Sect cultivators hiding here, who would be able to tell if they had snuck in from the outside or if they were originally here? Moreover, he was the elder of the Daylight Hall. The top 10 disciples would not be able to control him, so there was no need for him to care. After Zhang Yan spoke a few more words with the two of them, he bade farewell and left. He used his escape technique under the sea eye and came to the surface. Before he stepped out of the flying crane tower, he saw a spiritual light flying towards him and stopping in front of him. His expression changed slightly. He opened it and saw that it was a letter from Huxian. He said that if he was free, he could set a date to meet up on the 10 Peaks mountain. For the matter of the disciple stationed outside the sect, he had sent a letter a few days ago, wanting to meet up with Huxian. However, because Huxian was cultivating in the Daylight Hall, which was a place controlled by aristocratic families, it was not convenient for him to visit since he was not an elder of the sect. Thus, he could only invite him out for a discussion. Without further ado, Zhang Yan did not return to his residence. He immediately wrote a letter and sent it to the sky. Then, he flew up into the sky and flew towards the 10 peaks. Not long after, he reached the boundary and landed on the mountain peak, waiting with his sleeves behind his back. About an hour later, he saw a ball of golden flame descending from the sky. When it was 1,000 feet away, the light was easily separated. Huxian was wearing a vermilion bird's sun robe and a fluttering feather xian belt. He walked out leisurely. On top of his head, the 3 clouds seemed to have merged into one. It was obvious that he was about to enter the 3rd stage. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said with a smile, Senior Hu's cultivation is getting deeper and deeper. Breaking through the realm is just around the corner. When the time comes, you must inform me so that I can give you a congratulatory gift. Huxian shook his head and said emotionally, I appreciate Junior Zhang's kindness, but if I don't enter the grotto heaven, everything will be in vain. Then, he looked at Zhang Yan carefully and sighed, Junior Zhang is indeed the most talented among us. I am far inferior to you. Zhang Yan had heard that after Huxian entered the Daylight Hall, the Qin clan's support for him was far less than before. Looking at Huxian's expression now, he felt that the rumors were somewhat true. However, Huxian still managed to escape unscathed after taking Jun Yang's essence during the sword competition. He didn't make any mistakes in his position as the first seat, so he still took the position of the side hall master after he left the position. With this identity, no matter how the aristocratic families viewed him, he had the support of the sect. If no one competed with him, once he achieved the grotto heaven in the future, the position of hall master would be inevitable. Huoxian raised his sleeve and took out an item. He sent it forward and floated it over. He said, "After I took the position of first seat, the names of all the disciples I have used in the past 200 years are in this. Although many of them are from aristocratic families, they all have the ability to hold their own." Zhang Yan took it and put it in his sleeve. He said with a smile, "They are all disciples of my Qinsong. Before the devil tribulation, there is no distinction between aristocratic families and disciples." Huoxian nodded slowly and said, "Junior brother's words are reasonable. However, the situation that junior brother has to face now is more dangerous than when I was in the past. You must be careful. If there is anything that you need my help with, send someone to the Daylight Hall to inform me. If I can help, I won't just sit and watch." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, senior brother." After bidding farewell to Huoxian, he returned to the clear nether heavenly lake. The matter was urgent, so he didn't delay. He immediately sent out a letter according to the name list and ordered everyone to go to the clear nether heavenly lake to wait for orders. Half a day after the letter was sent, more than 100 core transformation realm disciples arrived. No one dared to be absent. Many people in the aristocratic families were unhappy that Zhang Yan had taken the position of first seat, but due to his prestige, they didn't dare to disobey him. Moreover, in addition to this position, Zhang Yan also held the position of lower house chancellor. No one was willing to offend him. After everyone arrived, Zhang Yan encouraged them and ordered them to go back to prepare. They needed to leave for their respective sects by tomorrow at the latest. However, these people weren't his disciples after all, and each had their own master's background. In order to prevent them from being incompetent, he selected more than 100 core transformation realm cultivators from within the sect to go with them in the name of assistance. After arranging everything, Jingyu came up and said in a low voice, "Master, Shendong is outside and wants to see you." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "Send him in." Shendong came into the hall and bowed respectfully. He said, "Enlightened Master, disciple is willing to go out and accompany your sect's disciples to exterminate the demon." Zhang Yan seemed to have expected this. He smiled and said, "Since you have this intention, I will do it for you. But where do you want to go?" Shendong was overjoyed when he saw Zhang Yan agree. He had seen the geographical map of the mountains and rivers and had already decided on a place to go. He immediately bowed and said loudly, "Disciple is willing to go to Linqing Monastery and guard it." Linqing Monastery was far away in the west. Compared to other sects, it was the furthest from Qinsong. The neighboring sects had long been destroyed. It could be said that it was alone and would be attacked by the cultivators of the demon sect every 10 to 15 days. If it wasn't for the 2 Yuanying cultivators in the sect and the disciples from Zhaoyu Mansion who kept sending over to help, it probably wouldn't have lasted long ago. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "You can be considered to be contributing to Qinsong. I will treat you equally. If you make a contribution, the mansion will reward you, but if you back out at the last minute, I will also punish you heavily. Are you willing?" Shendong was excited and said, "Disciple can't ask for more." Zhang Yan smiled and waved his sleeve. He said, "You may leave." Shendong bowed again and retreated out of the hall. After he left, Zhang Yan pondered for a while and took out a letter to read. He learned from sect master Qin that one of the 4 great demon caves would appear in the next few decades. At that time, there would be a fierce conflict between the mystic and demon sects. Before that, both sides would continue to accumulate their strength. After he arranged the affairs of the sect, he could use this time to go to Shaoqing to learn swordsmanship. Chapter 775. With Zhang Yan's permission, Shendong immediately took the talisman from his residence and went to Han Zuoqing's place to bid farewell. He did not wait for the 2 Qinsong disciples who were going to Linqing Monastery. He rode a smoke and left the cave that night and headed west. In the dark, the devil's doctrine had some tricks that were difficult to use. Therefore, even if the Xianmen disciples went out, they would choose to do it in the day. However, he practiced the orthodoxy of the spirit-returning sect. This sect was the #1 evil sect in Dongsheng 10,000 years ago. Many of their tricks could be used at night, so he did not have to worry. Moreover, since he came to Donghua continent, he had not had a fight. If there was an opponent to spar with him, he would be more than happy. After flying for more than 20 days, he was a little disappointed. Along the way, he did not see a single cultivator from the devil's doctrine. Halfway through, he purposely circled around a sect called Dawn Star sect that was destroyed. He thought that there would be disciples from the devil's doctrine there, but after checking, there was no trace of anyone. He felt helpless and could not help but sigh that he was not as lucky as Xiao Yang. That day when he returned to Donghua, he just casually circled around and he was able to meet people from the devil's doctrine. As for him, he wanted to fight, but he could not fulfill his wish. With a feeling of regret, he traveled west for another 5 days. Above the boundless land, he saw a towering mountain in the distance. It was leaning towards the east, like a strong bull with a high back and horns. This was the Green Bull Mountain where the mountain gate of Linqing Monastery was located. When he reached here, he was not as ostentatious as before. Instead, he hid his tracks and did not stir up any clouds. He only traveled with the wind through the dense forest. When he came, he had already found out that there were at least 2 Yuanying cultivators in Linqing Monastery, and the cultivators from the devil's doctrine could force them to not move. In that case, the other side should at least have a corresponding opponent. That was the path to death. When he was 1,000 miles away, he faintly felt that something was wrong. He did not rush forward, but took out a glazed stone. This treasure was given to him by the master of the Quantum Inn, Go Su Min. It could be used to observe the changes of spiritual opportunity from afar. He held it in his palm and cast a spell, causing the surrounding mountains and rivers to appear. However, with a single glance, he was shocked. The demonic aura at the foot of Black Ox Mountain surged into the sky. The condensed mass of aura was almost tangible, and it densely covered an area of several hundred kilometers. At this moment, who knew how many demonic cultivators had gathered here? He couldn't help but frown. How was he supposed to go inside? Could it be that they were waiting for the 2 Qinsang disciples to arrive before going in together? He thought about it and shook his head. At most, the other party's cultivation was similar to his, so there shouldn't be any other way. He took out the geographical map and looked at it carefully, then made up his mind. He had to think of a way to capture a cultivator from the devil's sect and ask him about the situation here. He put away the map and flew away. After searching for half a day, he stopped at the foot of a mountain. The slope of the mountain was east-west, and the east side was slightly elevated. It looked like a bird's head, but the bottom part was sunken into the rock wall. A river just happened to make a bend here, and the opposite bank was less than 100 meters away. There weren't many trees, so he could see everything at a glance. After circling a few times, he revealed a satisfied expression. First, he threw a sleeve pouch into the water, then a few pearls. Then, he landed on the mound, took out a cloak, and covered his body with it. This was only an artifact, it could only temporarily cover his body. If he made any movements, or even if someone were to take a few more glances, he would be exposed. However, he was confident that no one would notice him. No matter where the person came from, they would definitely be on guard for an ambush in the inner curve of the mountain, but they most likely wouldn't think that there would be someone hiding on the exposed slope. The pearls sparkled in the night, and spiritual aura overflowed. However, 2 days later, passers-by noticed it and went down to search. However, what was different from what Shindong had originally thought was that there were 3 people. One of them went down to investigate, while the other 2 stayed on guard outside. If he thought of a way to kill the 3 people, it was still possible, but if he wanted to capture them alive, he couldn't let the news leak. This made it difficult for him. However, he also knew that this trap was incomparably crude, and it would be an exaggeration to say that it was full of flaws. If he missed this opportunity, the other party would think of something suspicious and come back to investigate. Once the other party was on guard, it would be even more difficult for him to act again. Thinking of this, his eyes narrowed, and he thought to himself, being overcautious is not what people of my generation should do. A real man should be decisive. The spirit returning technique originally required the person who practiced it to advance courageously. He was originally a brave person, so after making up his mind, he immediately decided to take action. He stretched out his hands and took out 2 jade tablets from his sleeve bag. This was an artifact given to Han Zuocheng by the Blue Feather sect. There were 2 soul essences of the black bird imprisoned inside, and their cultivation was comparable to that of a core transformation cultivator. If he released them, he would have a fighting chance against these 3 people. As soon as he moved, he exposed himself. However, there was no point in hiding when facing 3 people. Thus, he tossed the 2 jade tokens into the air and let out a loud roar. He summoned a ray of spiritual light and charged toward the person in front of him. Deep beneath the waters of bright nether heavenly lake, 360 drops of netherine heavy water were constantly spinning in the water. Zhang Yan was sitting on a floating platform below, a jade bottle placed in front of him. Wisps of inky black essence energy floated out of the bottle, constantly being absorbed by the heavy water above. After these darkine essence beads were melted into the heavy water, he still needed to find a way to refine away the turbidine qi that had accumulated in them for thousands of years before he could completely turn them into his own. The darkine heavy water was quite powerful in the past fights, but it took a lot of time to cultivate, and the requirements were also quite harsh. In addition, he had many tricks up his sleeves, so he had never deliberately cultivated it before. Now that he had picked up these essence beads for free, he would not easily waste them. If it was when he had just left the Donghua continent, it might take him a few days to refine a drop of heavy water into Xianming heavy water. However, with his current mana, it was effortless. He could refine a drop in just 4 hours. After a month, he had already refined more than 200 drops of darkine heavy water before he stopped. It was not that his mana was insufficient, but that he had used up most of the darkine essence beads. There were only a dozen or so left, and it was not enough to refine the remaining heavy water. But he did not feel that it was a pity. The harvest this time was a pleasant surprise. Moreover, if it was not someone he knew, the darkine heavy water and darkine heavy water looked the same on the surface, but if they were used together against an enemy, it would be easier to succeed. With a shake of his body, he kept the heavy water into his Dharma body, turned into a ray of light, and went to the water. In a flash, he arrived at the cave abode, sat on the couch, and said, "Jingyu, I told you to pay attention to the movements at the eye of the sea, how is it now?" Jingyu hurriedly turned around from outside the door and said respectfully, "Master, since the eye of the sea was opened 10 days ago, I have been sending people to pay attention, but there is still no news." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. If there was nothing, that would be the best. He instructed, "If there is anything, report to me immediately." Jingyu said, "I know." He took out 2 letters from his sleeves and handed them over. "These were sent 2 hours ago. I have not passed them to Master to check." Zhang Yan took it and opened it. It was a letter sent by 2 disciples from Linqing Temple. The general idea was that the temple was besieged by a large number of cultivators from the Devil's Doctrine. The 2 of them stayed outside for more than 10 days but were still unable to enter, so they reported it to the sect, hoping to ask for help. The second letter was written by Shandong. It said that he had entered Linqing Temple and met Master Wang Ziyuan and senior apprentice Sister Yuan Yanhui. However, the situation in the temple was not good. The mountain gate formation was broken in many places, and according to Yuanying Jinren, there were at least 5 or more Yuanying cultivators attacking the mountain together, and the situation was critical. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows, a little surprised. Linqing Temple was not like Guangyuan, Pingyuan, and the other sections. There had never been any outstanding person in the sect, so why would the Devil's Doctrine mobilize so many people? In fact, this was also related to him. Since he became the head of the top 10 disciples, he once again sent disciples to various sects to guard them. It seemed to be a big move, and most of the cultivators from the devil's doctrine were smart people. After hearing about this, they had to hide far away to find a target. Linqing sect was the furthest away from Qinsang school, and the surrounding sects that were on good terms with it were all destroyed. There were only 2 Yuanying Jinren in the sect, and they were already exhausted from the previous attacks. Therefore, they gathered more than 100 Huadan cultivators and 5 Yuanying Jinren. Zhang Yan pondered. Since the devil's calamity, Xianmen had been in a passive state of defense and had never taken the initiative to look for enemies. There was a reason for this. Firstly, the cultivators of the devil's doctrine were elusive. If they encountered a powerful opponent, they would rather retreat than act rashly if they were not confident. Secondly, most of the devil's doctrine sects were in secret caves underground, so it was difficult to find them. Killing a few people outside would not help the overall situation. More importantly, the 6 devils doctrine had so far only attacked the small sects and did not attack the top 10 Xianmen. This was also one of the main reasons why Duda wanted to withdraw the disciples who were guarding the sect. He thought that Qinsang school did not need to work for the small sections. Zhang Yan sneered. Since he was one of the top 10 disciples, he must find a way to change this situation, or at least find a chance to suppress the arrogance of the devil's doctrine. He stood up and stared at the geographical map of Donghua Mountain on the wall. Finally, his eyes gradually fell on Linqing Temple. A cold light flashed through his eyes. That was the place where the cultivators of the devil's doctrine were attacking. Was it not an opportunity for him? However, there was one thing that he had to worry about. He was sure that there must be spies in the sect. It was fine for ordinary Yuanying cultivators to go out, but if his disciples such as Lu Yanni and Wei Zihong went out, it would arouse their vigilance. Therefore, if he wanted to completely eliminate this group of demonic cultivators, he must find a way to hide from them. He walked a few steps in the room, then turned back and said to Jingyu, "Go and call Zhuqing here." Not long after, Han Zhuqing entered the cave. He bowed and said uneasily, "What instructions does Master have for me?" Zhang Yan said gently, "Master Yu Yan came to me and said that she wanted to betroth her daughter, Yan Xie, to you. What do you think, disciple?" Han Zhuqing lowered his head and said, "Please forgive me, Master. Master Yan has already told me about this, but I did not dare to disturb Master with such a small matter, so I did not report to you first." Zhang Yan nodded and smiled. "It seems that you have taken a liking to this girl. Since this is the case, then this matter is settled." Han Zhuqing's face lit up. He hurriedly knelt down and said, "Disciple thanks Master for fulfilling my wish." Zhang Yan stretched out his hand to help him up. He said seriously, "There is one more thing that I need to tell you. The demonic flames outside the mountain are flourishing and need to be suppressed. When the time comes, I'm afraid that they will use your wedding banquet to make a fuss. After that, regardless of whether it succeeds or not, you will be remembered as a great merit." Chapter 776. P.S. There will be 2 more updates tomorrow. 3 days later, a spiritual light flew out of the Guardian Palace and went straight to the clear Serenity Lake. When it reached the door, the mirror spirit opened the formation door and let it into the depths of the cave. With Zhang Yan's care, Jingyu had been paying attention to the small devil's cave for the past few days. He wrote a letter every day and didn't dare to slack off. When he saw the spiritual light fly in, he knew that today's letter had arrived. He took it and was shocked. He hurriedly went into the cave and bowed. "Master, the disciple on duty at the Eye of the Sea reported that more than 20 disciples who went to the devil's cave to cultivate last night suddenly disappeared." When Zhang Yan heard this, his eyes turned cold. There was a devil in the devil's cave that attracted people's hearts. If the disciples' heart wasn't firm, it was inevitable that they would be harmed. However, more than 20 people disappeared in one night. This was not an ordinary reason. He said in a low voice, "Let me see." Jingyu hurriedly handed over the letter. After Zhang Yan read it, he threw the letter on the table and said coldly, "Who was responsible for patrolling the devil's cave a month ago?" Jingyu hurriedly said, "It was Jinren Peng's disciple, Shuesong." Zhang Yan sneered. Because opening the eye of the sea was not a small matter, he was afraid that the cultivators of the devil's sect had not been completely wiped out, so he sent disciples to check it out. However, Peng Yuzhou swore that with the protection of his sect, nothing would happen, so he blocked the people he sent. This person was one of the top 10 disciples in the past. It would be a joke to say that he couldn't even handle such a small matter. It was most likely that he didn't care about the lives of his disciples. He said, "Pass down my order Zihong to go to the devil's cave to protect that group of disciples." He paused for a moment, then said, "Call Kai Wei and Kading here." Jing Yu immediately went to pass down the order. Not long after, the Wang sisters entered the cave and paid their respects to him. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeves on the couch and threw down a talisman. He said, "The two of you take this talisman and capture Peng Yuzhou's disciple, Shui Song. If anyone tries to stop you, don't hesitate to take them down." Wang Kaiwei took the token with both hands. She thought for a while, then bowed and asked, "May I ask, Master? If Elder Peng steps forward to stop me, what should I do?" Zhang Yan said, "Master will make arrangements. The two of you can rest assured." The Wang sisters didn't ask any more questions. After bowing, they retreated. Zhang Yan sat for a moment, then reached into his sleeve and picked up a brush from the table. Schwa, schwa, schwa. After writing 2 letters, he circulated his transcendence energy and turned into 2 rays of spiritual light that flew out of the mansion. As he watched the letter fly out, his eyes flickered. The Daylight Temple was one of the 3 great temples. Peng Yuzhou was an elder of the palace and had a high status in the sect. He couldn't control him, but it didn't mean that no one could control him. Above the Great Dragon Lake, Peng Yuzhou sat in a flying car. It was pulled by a 2-headed scarlet-winged vermilion bird. It was heading towards the Guardian Palace. There was a slight smile on his face. In the past month, he had visited several clan leaders in the sect, and many of them had agreed to help him build up his influence. Many clans had even sent their disciples over to serve him because they valued his status as an elder of the Daylight Temple. He felt that in the past few hundred years, there had never been such an advantageous situation like the one he was in now. With Du Dagan and Zhang Yan ascending to the position of one of the 10 first seats, it could be imagined that in the next few hundred years, the clans would be firmly suppressed by the master and disciple sect. Now that he stood out, it could be said that he had grasped the key point. Because other than him, there was almost no one else in the clans who could stand out to compete. He sneered. Others might be afraid of Zhang Yan, but he wasn't. When Qi Yuntian became the first seat of the 10 first seats, he was already the eldest disciple of the 3rd generation. His cultivation was high, and he had made great contributions to the sect during the sword competition. Behind him, he had the support of the sect master and the entire master and disciple sect, so it could be said that no one dared to disrespect him. And for Huxian to ascend to this position, he had the support of the 4 clans. Later on, it was the same for Duda. But in his view, although Zhang Yan had cultivated to the 3rd stage of Yuanying and was the number 1 in the sword competition among the 18 sects, no one in the same generation could compare to him, but compared to Qi Yuntian and Huxian, he had a big flaw, and that was that he didn't have the support of the master and disciple sect master. For example, with his identity as an elder of the Daylight Temple, there was no way to control him. Now that the Devil's Cave had appeared, if he could make great contributions to the sect and regain the favor of the clans, then he could suppress Zhang Yan. After that, he would be able to compete with Huxian for the position of the Daylight Temple Master. Thinking up to this point, he couldn't help but be complacent. At this moment, from the corner of his eye, he saw a streak of smoke flying towards him. It was his disciple, Shui Gao. He ordered the disciple in front to slow down the flying carriage and waited for Shui Gao to come over. He then asked, "Didn't I tell you to focus on cultivating in the cave for the next few days? Why did you come here?" Shui Song looked a little flustered. He knelt down and said, "Master, disciple is afraid that disciple has committed a crime. I'm here to ask for master's protection." Peng Yuzhou frowned and asked, "What is it?" Shui Gao lowered his head and said, "Yesterday in the minor devil's cave, more than 20 disciples disappeared overnight. Disciple was terrified and afraid that the sect would blame me, so I came to find Master." Peng Yuzhou looked at him and said, "Is it because of this?" Shui Gao said anxiously, "Yes." Peng Yuzhou snorted and said unhappily, "I thought something big had happened." He shook his head and said, "Didn't you go and check under the devil's cave?" Shui Song said, "Yes, according to what disciples saw at the time, I didn't find anything strange. The devil's cave was vast and filled with devils. He was only a core formation cultivator, so how could he dare to go deep? Moreover, Peng Yuzhou had already said that he didn't need to be too serious and was just going to deal with it casually. He didn't think that there really were devil sect cultivators hiding there. Peng Yuzhou could ignore the clear nether heavenly lake, but he was a bit afraid. Peng Yuzhou said disapprovingly, "Since that's the case, it has nothing to do with you. It's just the death of a few junior disciples, so why are you so flustered? I'm going to the Guardian Palace to discuss some matters. If someone really comes to blame you, just tell them to come find me." With that, he ordered the disciples in front of him to pull the vermilion bird and continue on their way. When Shui Song heard this, he calmed down and respectfully bowed. He stood on the cloud and watched the flying carriage fly away. Then, he stepped on the smoke and returned to his cave. But before he could go far, two girls who looked similar to each other suddenly came over on a smoke, and one of them came up. One of them came up with an object in her hand and said, "Are you Shui Song? I'm here on Master's orders to bring you back for questioning." When Shui Song saw the token, he couldn't help but be shocked. He took a few steps back and said calmly, "Why is Daoist Zhang looking for me?" Wang Kating laughed and said, "Sister, there's no need for him to say so much. He knows very well in his heart. He's pretending to be confused." Shui Song said sternly, "I'm under Master Peng, and he's an elder of Daylight Hall. You dare to come and capture me?" Wang Kaiwei said solemnly, "Senior brother Shui, it's true that your master is an elder of Daylight Hall, but as long as you're a disciple of my Qinsang sect, you'll be under my master's control." Shui Song knew that he couldn't fight the two of them together. If he resisted, it would be hard to guarantee that he wouldn't be captured. Thus, he jumped and fled into the clouds. As long as he could get to Peng Yuzhou, the two girls couldn't do anything to him. Wang Kating was on guard when she saw his eyes flickering. Now that she saw him run away, he shrugged. Now that he was fleeing, she immediately took out a silk belt and waved it lightly. It flashed with 7 colors and turned into rays of rainbow light that chased after him. At the same time, she said, "Sister, stop him." Wang Kaiwei made a hand seal. She had already escaped into the killer Yin saber. The saber light turned and instantly flashed into the sky. In a breath's time, she was in front of Shui Song. She waved her hand and 2 saber lights, one Yin and one Yang, chopped down. Shui Song had no choice but to dodge to the side to avoid the saber light. But because of this obstruction, his momentum was also slowed down. He had no choice but to stop and fight. With a "hey" sound, a wine cup flew up from the top of his head. It spun once and sprinkled a red glow on his body. He then pushed his hands away and shook his shoulders. A cloud of smoke rose behind him and converged into countless golden flying blades that flew towards the Wang sisters. Wang Kating snorted and hid her hand in her sleeve. With a flick of her finger, a jade bead flew out. In front of her, Wang Kaiwei and her mind were connected. They raised their hands and pressed down at the same time. Suddenly, a delicate fragrance filled the air. Wisps of green smoke scattered down and all the golden flying blades disappeared one by one. Shui Song saw that the situation wasn't good and was about to use another method. At this moment, the jade bead had already arrived. It suddenly flew towards the wine cup. There was a loud sound and the red glow on his body was broken. His chest felt stuffy and his body felt weak. He was about to fall from the clouds. He hurriedly steadied himself. However, this delay allowed the ribbon in Wang Kating's hand to fly over. In the blink of an eye, he was trapped and couldn't move anymore. Shui Song struggled but he couldn't escape. He couldn't help but panic, but he didn't admit defeat. He shouted, "Fine, go ahead and capture me. My master is an elder of the Daylight Temple. Let's see how you deal with this later." The Wang sisters didn't pay any attention to him. They stuck a few more talismans on his body. Only then did they rise up into the air and fly north. At the same time, Peng Yuzhou arrived at the Shouming Palace. Qin Nan came out to greet him. They sat down in the hall and exchanged a few words. Then he asked, "Junior sister Qin, did Immortal Peng summon me for something?" He wanted to come out and fight. It wasn't that he didn't want Immortal Peng's support. After all, he was a member of the Peng family. It was just that he didn't get any response from Immortal Peng. Since Qin Nan had always treated him coldly, he suddenly thought that there might be a response from Immortal Peng. He was slightly excited and immediately put down what he was doing and rushed over. Qin Nan said, "It wasn't my master who asked you to come. It was someone else." Peng Yuzhou was surprised and asked, "Who?" At this moment, he heard footsteps. He turned around and saw Zhang Yan slowly walking out from the back of the hall. When he came near, he cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, Elder Peng." Peng Yuzhou's brows raised as he glanced at Zhang Yan, then glanced at Qin Nan, and he instantly came to an understanding. He grunted coldly and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Daoist Zhang. May I know why you called me here?" Zhang Yan looked at him and said, "Yesterday, in the minor demon cave, more than 20 disciples died for no reason. Does Elder Peng know about it?" Peng Yuzhou became a little impatient when he heard it was about this again. He said, "I've heard about it." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "I've said before that the cleanup of the minor demon cave involves the safety of our Qinsang disciples. If anything goes wrong, I will punish them. Since Elder Peng knows about it, don't blame me for not respecting our friendship." Peng Yuzhou became vigilant and said, "What are you going to do?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "I've already ordered people to arrest Shui Song. When the time comes, he will be punished according to his crime." Peng Yuzhou suddenly stood up and anger appeared on his face. He then took a deep breath and suppressed it. He said, "Immortal Zhang, as the 10 great disciples' first seat, how can you lower your status and stand up for a few junior disciples?" Chapter 777. When Zhang Yan heard that Peng Yuzhou didn't care about his disciple's life, he frowned. Just as he was about to speak, Wang Caiwei's voice came from outside the door. She said, "Master, I've brought Shui Song here. May I know what to do with him?" Just as she finished speaking, Shui Song's voice was heard. He cried, "Master, Master, save me." Zhang Yan snorted coldly. He waved his sleeves and immediately leaped out of the palace. Peng Yuzhou was anxious. He shouted and immediately activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique. He wanted to freeze him for a moment so that he could rush over first. However, just as he used the technique, his body tightened as if a huge rock was pressing down on him. He knew that Zhang Yan had also used the same technique. He snorted and took out a technique. With a flip of his hand, he dispelled it. When he was about to move again, there was another surge of spiritual vigor around him. His feet were unsteady. It was as if he would be turned away if he relaxed. He had no choice but to use his mana to resist it. However, he slowed down by half a beat. His face couldn't help but change. He said in a low voice, 5 elements escape technique.